This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
You're wrong! If you're getting any compensation, it's not charity!
Russ Wakelin. You put me on a boat with frickin' dragons attacking me and whatnot? Now we're talking. And Mack Martin in the third chair.
They're gonna hate us.
With contributions from Total Fangirl.
Vampires do not sparkle.
And our loyal listeners.
Are you crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, coming under the speed of a Mage Hunter of Eos with physical of 5, Spring, and Jump 7. This edition is brought to you by Red Wyvern Games, releasing Engage, Cinematic Starship Combat, and Days of the Conqueror, Mass Dark Age Battles at Valhalla on 16th of June. Today, our panelists are, as always, Russ Wraith Engine Wakelin and special guest, Wyrd Pundit Extraordinaire, Mark Jonas Murdoch Martin. Let's begin. Issue number 1. In 1998, Dr. Spencer Johnson published a motivational book entitled Who Moved My Cheese? An amazing way to deal with change in your work and in your life. This business parable describes various ways to react to change in both life and the workplace, and was a New York Times business bestseller for almost 5 years. The book tells the story of 4 creatures traveling through a maze as their food supply is constantly moving, and is used as a metaphor for how people deal with change. Question. 2 of the 4 characters in the story were mice named Sniff and Scurry. The other 2 creatures trapped in the maze with Sniff and Scurry were named Hem and Haw. What were they? White-footed Wakelin.
Ferrets.
Muskrat Martin.
Oh, owls?
Negative! That means both wrong! Little people, of course. It's right in there. Mice, little people. And of course, being people, they were far less adaptable than the mice. Issue number 2. In mathematical terms, a spiral is a curved line that emanates from a central point, moving progressively farther away as it moves around that point. The triple spiral, or triskela, and I'm going to get emails about that one, is a Celtic and pre-Celtic symbol found on a number of Irish megalith and Neolithic sites. Exactly what the triple spiral means to the pre-Celts, we cannot know, but it is still used today, often in Celtic artwork or in association with Celtic Reconstructionist paganism. Question. In association with Celtic Reconstructionist paganism, the triple spiral is thought to represent the 3 realms. What are the 3 realms? Rudianus Russ.
Life, death, and earth.
Menon and Mack.
Burger King, Round Table Pizza, and McDonald's.
Closer than Russ. You guys are serious. I mean, you are so behind on your Celtic Reconstructionist paganism terminology.
Oh, man.
Obviously, the 3 realms refer to land, sea, and sky. Man, come on, the vernal equinox, you guys are going to be up a Wicker Man without a get out of the Wicker Man free card. Issue number 3. Adepticon is a premier fan-organized war games convention held each year in Chicago, Illinois, starting in 2003 when it supported solely Games Workshop games. The convention has grown steadily over the past 10 years, most recently filling the Westin in Lombard, Illinois to the very brim, despite the exigencies of weather and the many challenges presented by the gaming community. Question. This year, Adepticon broke many of its own records, from attendance to the time it took for various events to sell out. From the moment players were able to sign up for the Fantastic 40K Team Tournament, how long did it take for that event to completely sell out? Warboss Wakelin.
90 minutes.
Assault Marine Mack.
89 minutes. We're playing by Price is Right rules, right?
We are, and unfortunately that means you're both over, and so wrong! 53 minutes. In 53 minutes, over 100 teams of 4 were signed up to butt heads in that massive, glorious ballroom. I love the smell of Promethium in the... What? That wasn't Promethium? Gamers? Oh, okay. Issue number 4. The Iron Kingdoms present a very diverse background with many different iconic fantasy races, from humans to elves, from dwarves to ogre... and with multiple human kingdoms to boot. And of course, far to the east are the cultures that make up the hordes. And among all these different races and factions, you have a nearly inexhaustible combination of careers and avocations that might inform any adventurer traveling across this vibrant backdrop. Question. In the Iron Kingdoms, years are designated with either BR or AR. Currently, the canon of the Iron Kingdoms is considered to be in the early 600s AR. What, specifically, does the designation AR or BR mean? Ursus Sovkver Russ.
I should know this, but I don't. So I'm going to go with after Ragnarok.
Mikhail Krios Mack.
Assault rifle.
that was my choice. And unfortunately, that's a clean sweep, folks, and that makes you both wrong before or after the rebellion against the Orgoth.
Oh, yeah.
Russ.
It's Ragnarok, same thing.
Master. That's all we've got for this episode. Thanks for listening, and good night.
This episode of the D6 Generation is brought to you by Lone Wolf Development. Take your game to the next level.
And by Geek Nation Tours. Rise up and join the Geek Nation, touring the world at geeknationtours.com.
And by Conquistador Games, focusing on immersive and thematic games. More details at cqgames.com.
And the War Store, bringing the war to your door since 1999, and that is for a decade or more.
And by Winged Hussar Publishing, providing books for students of history and history students. wingedhussarpublishing.com. And by Game Salute, publishing awesome tabletop games through the Powered by Game Salute program, supporting independent publishers, stores, and the industry at gamesalute.com. Hello!
Oh!
Hello.
And welcome to episode 126 of the D6 Generation. I'm Russ Wakelin.
I'm Craig Gallant.
And I'm Mack Martin.
Hey, Mac, welcome so much to the show.
Salutations, everyone.
Thank
Now,
you for...
longtime listeners will remember that we actually interviewed Mac a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's here for the full 3C treatment.
Indeed. Thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule, Mac, between designing various miniature games, RPGs, and rewriting whole rule sets. You know, you're a very busy guy.
For those who don't know, Mac, where are you? Where did you settle down?
I currently am in Placerville working for Wyrd Miniatures.
Nice.
Miniatures.
Very good. Last time we spoke to you, you worked for Fantasy Flight Games. You're just playing the field there.
Oh, well, you know, that's kind of how it works in the industry. You know, you work somewhere for a little while, you get tired of the weather, you move back home.
Fair enough. Sounds good. Well, we'll talk all about that more when we do the big, part of today's show. We're going to talk to Mac about Malifaux version 2.
Yeah.
So get all the inside skinny from Mac, from man behind the action there, doing all that good stuff. And then also later this episode, we're going to talk about the Iron Kingdoms role-playing game.
Right.
So
It's
that'll be
about
fun.
time, we figured.
It is. We've been playing it a lot. Looking forward to talking about that a lot. But before we do all that, we got a few things to cover here. First of all, we just recorded the Lost Chapters, book 55. Mac, do you know what we talked about in Dunkin' Donuts there? Do you remember?
I think we mostly talked about Adepticon.
We did. Craig and Mac relayed their epic adventures at Chicago this year.
They were nothing if not both epic and adventurous.
Indeed. So if you want to hear all about that, check that out. Now, Craig, how do people go about checking out the Lost Chapters?
Well, if I were to want to check out the Lost Chapters, and I would go to our website at www.the d6generation.com, and then I would look for Charlie, the little cherub, on the right-hand margin, and he's holding a big bunch of books, many of whom are missing chapters. And if you click on that, you can find The Lost Chapters, which is a whole series of short 45 minutes to an hour segments that we do so that those people who want to support the show can join up for that for a minimal fee and get access to all of our catalog. And there's many of them. How many are there, Russ? Are we in the 40s or
55? 55 is right.
There's 55 of them. I should have known. I should have seen that right there. Yeah. And so that's a lot. And they cover all kinds of topics, including what we try to do with many of those is do segments that will have a long shelf life.
Right.
A lot of our primer ideas are on there. A lot of our introduction to a variety of different types of games are on there. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely check that out. And we greatly appreciate those folks that sign up to the Lost Chapters, and we try not to make it some sort of an exclusive that you can't live without it. This is and always will be our main show, and this is where the really good stuff goes. Although every now and then we have had a little gem drop on the Lost Chapters, so you never can tell. But
right.
That's what I do. I'd click on there. I'd go on there. Of course, you can always get our free app.
Indeed, that's right. iOS, Android, all there. So thank you, Craig, for that gem of an information seminar. There.
Ooh, gem. There we go.
So there we go. So what's the time now for, Craig?
Right now it's probably about time for Achievements in Gaming.
Thank you, Craig. And Achievements of Gaming is brought to us this time by Days of the Conqueror. Maintain discipline in your ranks. Outsmart and outfight your opponent in a thrilling 10mm game of Norman Conquest at redweaverngames.com. So, for those who are new to the show, we get new listeners all the time. Achievements of Gaming, we talk about what we've been playing lately in 3 categories. Up first is games we played that are basically pulp. Unplugged games. So, Mac, what have you been playing lately on the tabletop?
Well, I just played in a Warhammer 40K tournament this last weekend.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I managed to get just utterly wrecked in my 3rd round after doing pretty well in my first 2.
What'd you play?
I took my Grey Knights with some Imperial Guard backup.
Oh, nice.
Peace.
Now, are these all the new Grey Knight plastics?
Oh yeah. I've got about 6,000 points of painted Grey Knights.
Wow.
And then a little bit more for Guard and some regular Space Marines and that sort of thing. So I just kind of grab a bunch of toys I like, throw them on a list, and see what I can do with them.
Nice.
And how'd that work out for you?
Pretty good in my first 2 games. Had a lot of fun against a couple of good opponents. It was just really fun because I haven't gotten to really relax for a day and play miniatures games. And then my 3rd round opponent, who was a really great guy named Cody, we had a blast, but he got a little lucky in the first round and was able to press that advantage because he was in a really good position and just worked me over like a sandbag. It was pretty impressive.
Wow, nice. Well, it's always happy to lose well, I guess.
Yeah. Oh no, he was a great opponent, and
Nice.
can't fault him for it.
Great.
You could if you wanted.
Oh, you could, yeah.
I guess I could be whining.
It's very kind that you're not. What else have you been playing? 40K is awesome. What else have you been playing?
On the tabletop, a lot of card games with friends. We're trying to do a weekly board game night. So, getting the Munchkin and the Betrayal on the House on the Hill and Small World and that sort of thing in.
Oh, very nice. Excellent.
Some fantastic games in that little list.
Good selection,
Yeah.
indeed. Yeah. How about you, Craig? What have you been playing?
Nothing.
Oh,
I
wow.
played 1 game of Dungeon Command with Ryan and Chris last weekend. That's all I managed to squeeze in. I've had it's been a rough, busy few weeks.
Wow. Okay, well, I have some few games I've been playing, so I'll fill in the gap here. Let's see.
There's a big giant list there for you.
Up first, last night I played, last time I played at the store, it was City of Remnants. So this is the new hotness I mentioned. We got an early copy at PAX East. I believe it's out in store shelves now, though. You can find it. This is a new game from Plaid Hat Games, and I like it because it's got, it's kind of got an economy building part, but then you also fight. So the fluff in this game is that it's the far future. Aliens have basically been taken over the galaxy, and when they conquer a planet, they send all the former residents to this little, basically, prison planet, and it's basically just a slum, a pit, a giant urban center where everybody gathers, and they're formed gangs there. So you get to play one of these gangs who are trying to eke out a living by forming organizations, building urban areas, and then also fighting it out. It's pretty cool. Got a nice economy, and then also giant space robots drop in and attack you in the middle of the game also randomly, which throw a big kink into the works. Had a great time. Very, very close game. Really enjoying City of Remnants. It's a lot of fun. Let's see. Also, okay, so this game, so it was Mother's Day recently. Go Moms. And my wife, who of course is a mother, is a big fan of Castle, the television show. And my mother-in-law is also a big fan of Castle, the television show. And she's also a big fan of like whodunit style murder mysteries and games. So when I saw on the shelf the recently released Castle, the detective card game based on the television show, I figured I had to get this for them to try out.
Oh, I have to look into that too. My aunt and my mom are ridiculously big fans of Nathan Fillion.
Yes, exactly. So I figured it'd be good. Now, here's the thing. The artworks are great, and the card game is $30, but to offset that kind of high price for a card game, it does come with actual, really very, very nice, almost clay-feeling poker chips. And what you basically do is you deal out these 5 sort of generic suspect cards, and it'll be like, the cheating spouse, or, the jealous sister, or the business rival kind of thing, right? And then on top of them, you're going to shuffle up these poker chips, and one of them says guilty on the back, and other ones just say not guilty, but then have some kind of penalty or advantage. And you put them all down on the suspects, so one of these suspects did it. And then each of these suspects cards also have different activities you might do from the show, like search a suspect's house, or do a background check on the suspect, that kind of thing. And you're trying to build a hand of cards that makes the right combination to go ahead and do those activities and try to vet out if one of the suspects did it or not. Now, unfortunately, this whole thing is very random. So basically, There isn't like a lot of deductive reasoning in this, like you might find in Clue even or other games. What you're really just doing is managing a hand and trying to find the cards. The only sort of deductive reasoning is you can look in the eyes of the other players and see if they're figuring out what's going on, because there's also action cards you can play that lets you peek at some of the poker chips and glean whether you personally know if one of the people did it. And so you can kind of watch the other players, see what they're looking, see what they're doing, and try to figure that out. So a little bit of that going on, but mostly it's kind of a luck game that's kind of strongly themed, but not too much deductive reasoning. So it's kind of fun. If you have a very, very light gaming crew who just wants to sit back, maybe play it before an episode of Castle, maybe kind of fun. But it's not really a high-end deductive reasoning game, unfortunately. But my mom-in-law seemed to like it, so there you go. Also played Survive Escape from Atlantis with the kids, one of their favorite games of all time. Had a great time with that again. Also tried a new game called Cartoona. Have you guys seen this thing? Nope.
No, I have not. What is this about?
So Cartoona is a...
I want to Google it right now. How do I spell that?
Cartoona. And it's a game where you've got a bunch of tiles, and these tiles are all different artwork from, just different drawn artwork from a certain sort of crazy cartoony art style. And you're building creatures. And basically you're just playing tiles from your hand, trying to build the best creature, and you got to match the right neck to the right body to the right feet. But what's interesting about it is that the different body parts are worth different points. And there are cards you can then play which will swap body parts out or attach negative values to body parts. And it all of a sudden becomes a very screw your neighbor game that's actually got a surprising amount of sophistication and very simple kid-friendly game format. So it was actually a lot of fun. My girls loved it. They kept wanting to play it again and again. So that's Cartoona. If you've got younger kids or even me, I'd say tweens even might really enjoy this game as well. So check that one out if you like sort of crazy, but get your kids kind of into a little burn your opponent kind of mode.
Oh, this game looks adorable now that I'm looking at it.
It's very cute. I like the artwork a lot, and it actually got a lot more depth to it than you might think. And it's got different game modes, too. So like there's a game mode where you play very simply, and then there's the game modes where it adds more complexity to the game as well for younger and older players.
Yeah, it looks like one of those really great, simple to learn, has a neat little kind of fun, I don't want to say gimmick, but you know what I mean, that kind of like that tactile visual appeal to get you right into it. But then the gameplay looks nice and simple, but that probably hides a lot of complexity. No, it looks like a really cool little game.
Yeah, there's a lot of evil stuff going on. And for example, if you build, you can attach any tiles to each other. Like you put any head on any body. But if you build a creature that's all the same color, you score double points. So what'll happen is someone will be collecting and getting it just right and really wanting to get exactly the right color creature. And then all of a sudden I'll get a card I can play that says swap one of my tiles with one of your tiles as long as it fits. So all of a sudden you're like one placement away from a double score huge creature, and I all of a sudden swap out your purple head with the yellow one, and now you're SOL. So it's kind of that kind of stuff going on. Good fun. Also played recently The Duke. Now, The Duke is a brand new, it was kickstarted last year. Catalyst Game Labs is putting this thing out. And it is an abstract board game, and it's got some really nice components. So imagine chess, okay, where you've got a grid, and you've got pieces that move like chess pieces. So some of them slide diagonally, some of them slide orthogonally like rooks. But what's interesting is the pieces are all these really nice wooden pieces, and on each piece is a little wooden grid, and the wooden grid defines how the piece moves. And what happens is you start the game with only 3 pieces. Your Duke, your main piece, and then 2 footmen. But each turn, and you can either move a piece or you can recruit a new piece from your bag of bits. And you get this bag of lots of different wooden tiles, and when you pull a piece out of the bag, you put it adjacent to the Duke, and it's a new piece. But again, depending on the markings on the piece, tell you how the piece moves. One piece might be a rook, one piece might be move like a bishop, one piece might hop, but they move in a lot of different ways beyond the idea of chess. For example, there are pieces that move like a rook, but when they move like a rook, they also hop, so they can jump over things. There are pieces that can attack without moving and just strike something from 2 squares away, but don't actually move to that spot, so you can kill something that's guarded, protected like you might in chess. What's really interesting about the game is after you move a piece, you flip it to the other side. On the reverse side of the piece is a different movement pattern for the same piece. So as you move a piece backward and forward, back around the board, it's going to change what it can do. A lot of depth here. What's interesting about it is it's got the same sort of thinking as chess, but I'm actually finding it's easier to teach my girls than chess, because unlike chess, where you basically need a cheat sheet to tell your kids, okay, the knights move this way, the bishops move that way, and if it's the first time playing chess, you got to have something to look up. But with the Duke, all the movements on the tiles. So once you learn the different movement icons, which is like 4 of, you're ready to rock, and you can easily learn the pieces. And what's even more interesting about the game is they now already are working on expansions where you can buy more tiles, which introduce even more crazy bits to the game. So it's a really interesting abstract game. If you like 2-player abstract games, you definitely want to check this out. If you like games like Go and chess and that kind of stuff. Also, what's cool about it, Mac, is that it comes with a couple other tiles too. Like it comes with terrain tiles. There's a few tiles in like a mountain and a tree and even a dragon. And these are like sort of in advanced play. You put them on the board and they just sort of get in your way. But also the dragon's sort of interesting because you can basically provoke the dragon, get him to rotate and move and flip over, and all of a sudden he's breathing fire on your opponent's pieces. It's kind of cool. There's lots of little depth in there. And then they've got themed expansions too. So they have like a Robin Hood expansion with a bunch of bits that are themed after Robin Hood, and they've got
a Conan expansion.
Conan, right? They're doing Marvel Heroes. It's all this crazy stuff. So it's a pretty neat game. Again, if you like abstract games, check it out. All right. So then, Craig, you're gonna like this. So
Yeah.
Rafe brings in Power Grid First Sparks.
Indeed.
All right, so this is the Caveman Power Grid game. And somehow he convinces Dave from the Nurfed podcast and myself to play this game with him. And I have to say it was a lot of fun. I think it's a stronger Power Grid game than Power Grid, actually. It's got really cool little caveman meeples. And then it's also got really cool little different kinds of food meeples. So there's like fish meeples and berry meeples. And the idea basically is, in Power Grid, you're building these supply chains of electricity. But in this game, you do sort of build chains, but instead of building chains of electricity, you're building little lines of your cavemen around the board, trying to get them near different food sources. So you might have one caveman near the woolly mammoths, you might have one caveman near the berry bushes, and then you're going to try to increase your technology so that you can harvest berries or, with better baskets, or woolly mammoths with better spears, or fish with better fishing gear. But what happens is there's a limited food supply of each type. So if everybody goes for berries, you outstrip each other, and suddenly you're all fighting for the same resource and get in trouble. So you have to kind of balance your kingdom. Kind of neat. I like the mechanics. Very simple to learn. Very easy to play. It was my favorite version of the Power Grid series. I really like that one. Let's see. Also, played a prototype of a new game called Princes of the Dragon Throne. So this is going to be going on Kickstarter soon, powered by Game Salute. And Dan from Game Salute brought it into the stores. Like, anyone want to try a new game? And I'm always a sucker for a new game. And I'm always a sucker for a new game when it's got lots of wooden components, especially if all those wooden meeples are shaped like dragons. There's like more dragon meeples in this game. There's like dragon meeples. There's little soldiers with shields and sword meeples. A very sort of interesting area control / political game. I don't know. I liked it, but I didn't love it. But I got to play a little more. There's a lot going on. It's kind of hard. It's one of those games where there's so many choices you sort of get overwhelmed. And I think I got overwhelmed a little bit. But it looks great on the tabletop.
And when you had to give it your old autograph, what did you write, Russ?
Oh, I wrote much better than Agricola. So I was, which was, for me is high praise.
Indeed.
Yes. Also got to play the new science from our friends at Conquistador Games.
Good things.
Got to play it with my friend Joel. He loved it. I loved it. I had it at the store last night trying to get a game in. I had to leave early, unfortunately. So I didn't get the chance to play it, but a lot of people wanted to try it out. It's a good game. We're going to play it more. I'm going to get you the table with that, Craig. I think you're going to like it.
No, we're setting something up right now, I believe.
Indeed we are. And then also, finally, my last one here, I know I've got a long list here, got to play Sentinels of the Multiverse again. This game's getting a lot of play at both the house and the gamers. This is the game, again, where you're playing a superhero, and you're fighting a bad guy, and it's co-op. And it's not IP-based, so it's their own IP, but it's a lot of fun. Having a great time trying to figure out best combos of heroes to beat which villains. My kids love this game now. They're totally addicted to it. Great time. Good for gamers and for family members. So that is Sentinels of the Multiverse, another great one. So, that's all my gaming. Now, what about modeling? Mac, you doing any modeling lately?
I just finished up some of our new plastics here at Wyrd. I'm working on, what's a McCabe box set as well. I just finished up a limited edition Mysterious model. Ooh. And I see a frame for our new Avatar Hoffman over on the other table. I'm pretty sure if I just snagged it and took it home and painted it, nobody would notice, and if they did, they'd be happy about it.
That is awesome, and I am so jealous right now. It's awesome.
Oh, he looks fantastic. He's on a 50-millimeter base, and he's basically hanging off the thing. He's just huge.
Oh, sweet. So how you liking? I know you work for them, and you're going to tell me they're awesome anyway. But how you liking the new plastics? Honestly, they rocking.
We're definitely learning a lot, and some of the new ones that I get to see are really impressive. I mean, I'm a fan of the old ones too, but the new Hoffman is way fewer pieces than I was expecting, and I can just look at the frame and see exactly how to put them together, and all the detail is there and really sharp. So things are coming along great, and it's just I'm really, really looking forward to see what we do when we start re-releasing some of the older masters in plastics.
Ooh, I can't wait.
I'm constantly telling my boss, like, the second you get the preview frame that we check for quality for Lady Justice, just send that right on over here.
I'll check it for you myself. Nice. Awesome. How about you, Craig?
No. Sadly, I have been doing no modeling.
I know. I'm in the same boat. Although I have, so this is sort of modeling. I've been eyeing new terrain for my Sedition Wars game. So I love Sedition Wars, love the rules, love the models. I do not like the Warpy boards, so I'm trying to find some new terrain. I've been watching either Kickstarter or other folks who are making. There's a lot of really cool cardstock terrain flying around right now. You know.
Hey, Craig, when did we get to start counting shopping as hobby work?
Surprised. Give me surprise, Mac.
I think we all do this.
What Russ counts in various different categories.
I was helping my girlfriend shop for shoes, and I was comparing those paint colors to Blood Angels, so that counts, right?
Absolutely does, I think.
Look,
circumstances.
If you were shopping for shoes with her and you saw a good box that would make a nice building, then it would count.
I blame Rafe, to be honest. He's the first one who busted this particular.
All right, fine.
Wide open.
Fine. But if anybody knows.
Thinking about buying a new unit, that is not painting.
All right, but if you're out there, listeners, and you know some good terrain for sci-fi terrain, email me. Just saying.
Oh, that's what it was. That's what it was, Mac. It was crowdsourcing.
Yes. See, that's how I roll.
To be an achievements in gaming thing.
Right. I'll take an achievement for creative use of categories. See,
I will say that I've been looking at my Outlaw Chiquita from the Wild West Exodus handout at Adepticon, and I really wish I had. I've been looking at her. I've been looking at all of my 10 Thunders stuff that I got right after Gen Con, and I've been looking at all of my Infinity stuff that's been sitting around, and I just don't have time for any of it. But I look at it. Does that count?
I have an entire. Yes, it counts because I have an entire armada. For my brain's shutting down on the steampunk boats and land cruisers.
Dystopian Wars.
Dystopian Wars. Thank you. That's at the end of my day. Yeah, I have an entire armada for Dystopian Wars just ready to go of my Brits, and I haven't even. They're literally still in packaging.
Okay.
Sad, Matt, because those things pretty much paint themselves.
I think
it's all dry brushing and washing.
I think we've established a new rule here on the show, which is if 2 or more of the current hosts have not done any modeling, we can talk about things we should be modeling but aren't. And so
we're going to call that the Mack Martin rule.
And
I did modeling this week. I painted this week.
Good point.
It's because you didn't do it. It's just because you were here when we decided that was a rule.
Right. So there you go. All right. What about other geeky stuff? So TV shows we're into, movies, books we're reading. Mac, what do you got going on in the that area?
I mean, besides the obvious Game of Thrones like addiction.
Yeah. How you liking the season?
Oh. Every Sunday, I'm there with the needle, just ready for the next hit. But no, I'm also playing through XCOM finally, which I'm really enjoying.
Ooh, excellent choice! It's a great game.
Yeah, I very rarely, very very rarely get to play through games even close to when they came out. But I decided to kind of make an effort, so I played through BioShock Infinite. I downloaded it the day it came out.
Oh yeah.
And then I'm working my way through XCOM, and I'm loving it.
Oh, good choices! Both fantastic games. Well worth your time, I think. Nice. Cool. Any movies lately?
I mean, I saw Iron Man 3.
Well, let's talk about that. What'd you think of Iron Man 3?
I quite liked it. I think there's I really liked the kind of Jackie Chan-esque action scenes they were doing. Mm-hmm. I also liked the change about how they treated the suit, where instead of it being kind of the superhero itself, it was treated much more like a motorcycle or a vehicle. Mm-hmm. And I really liked the kind of punch up on the action sequences. My only real beef was in the third act, they reveal an ability that the main villain has, and then he never uses it again. And I'm like, come on, that was a cool one. You can work that into the Jackie Chan style fight scenes. Let's make that happen.
Craig, what did you think of Iron Man 3?
I went and saw it again last night instead of playing games.
Oh, so there you go.
I loved it. I was intrigued. I thought it was a neat storyline. I liked that. I'm such a big fan of Robert Downey Jr. that I'd pretty much watch him in anything at this point.
Right.
And I just love his Tony Stark and just watching him. And I love that he has all this bravado, but then nothing he does is without consequences, which is another element of that whole franchise that I really like. I don't get it because so many of our friends saw it the day before we did, Russ.
Yeah, right.
Emails were fast and furious. Oh, can't wait. Then there was like 3 hours of silence. And then immediately, oh, man, that did not live up to expectations. Blah, 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 blah. And I failed to notice when that movie started to suck.
I know.
Sorry.
I completely agree. I had like a 3-hour conversation with one of my friends afterwards. I'm like, I do not see where you didn't like that movie.
Yeah.
Everything you mentioned that you didn't like, I just don't even see.
Yeah.
And it was a reunion of him and the same director from Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, wasn't it?
I think so.
Think so.
But the big thing the biggest complaint I heard was that was not an Iron Man movie. That was a Tony Stark movie. And I'm like, and what's your point? Because that's
all Tony Stark.
I know. That was an awesome. I loved it.
That to me, that like what I've noticed, and actually I noticed it again today when the Agents of Shield full-sized promo came out today.
Yes.
And all of the guys who like love comic books and have this whole Marvel universe memorized in my head are the guys who are like have trouble like, oh, it's not how that's not supposed to, or, oh, that's not the guy that did that over there. And I'm like, I feel sorry for them. I mean, I don't begrudge them that, because that's how I would react like if they messed around with the Game of Thrones, but I'm just like, oh, I wish you could experience it the way I'm experiencing it, because I loved Iron Man and I got chills watching the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV promo that came out today, because I have no preconceived baggage going into this. I don't know who A, B, and C is. I don't know how they're supposed to react, and I know that the company is going to want to make something unique and interesting and new so that it's not just a rehash of something that's been gone over and over again. But it doesn't matter to me because I've never seen it at all anyway. And
Go ahead, Mac.
Oh, one of the weirdest things about that is they do mess with Game of Thrones, right? They do change some stuff up, not because they didn't like it, not because it doesn't work in the story, but because the pacing of a movie is different than the pacing of a book. Absolutely. In a movie, you show people everything, so you don't need to describe someone's armor. Right. Unfortunately, that also means you're going to lose some of the history that's in that description.
Right.
Yep.
There's a lot that goes into it. We see Bilbo's door at the beginning of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Yep.
And The Hobbit, but that's actually like 15 freaking pages in the book where you're settling into the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
and so a lot of people will complain about changes when really those changes are for pacing or just because they're trying to make something new.
Right.
Well, I think it's funny too that because in the comic, especially that the comic book fans are so frustrated when things change to the movies, because comics probably more than any other medium get rebooted all the time in their own genre.
Yeah.
Right. They're rebooting heroes all the time in those books.
Well, and it frustrates them in the comic book. Like the fans are frustrated with that with comic books too. Yeah. But they do that simply because there's the legacy of issue after issue after issue.
Right.
Readers who have been gone for a while feel like they can't get back in, and new readers just feel like there's this wall of information they can't penetrate.
Right.
And that's why the reboots happen, so that new people can get started.
Yeah. Right. Well, I liked it. Long and short of it, that was a great film. I'm sorry. It was awesome.
No, I loved it. I had a great time.
Agreed. So, anything else, Mac?
Let's see. Game of Thrones, Iron Man. I saw Great Gatsby. That was pretty great. But I don't know if that counts as nerdy, because I mean that's literature nerd. Does that count?
It's totally literature nerdy, which is fine.
Yeah. So, Craig, I've not seen it. Did you see it?
I have not seen it, but I would like to. But I kind of want to. The English teacher in me wants to reread the book before I see the movie.
Well, I can break it down for you. It's a pretty true to the book representation. Again, slight changes for pacing. And then they use a framing device of Caraway writing as he's Calloway, my brain shut down. Writing as he's in an institution. So he's seeking mental help and he's writing all of this down, and that lets us get a lot of F. Scott Fitzgerald's text, all that beautiful prose and language in as narrative dialogue from all the characters. So that's clever. And then the only thing I didn't like is they don't play up the fact that Daisy might not actually be worth all this trouble, that she is kind of vapid, that she is very materialistic, and that just as our witness, I want to call him Caraway, but it might be Calloway, or my brain is shutting down for some reason, watches and does the hero worship with Gatsby. Gatsby is doing that hero worship with Daisy, and she really fits more into Buchanan's world than his. And so it's a whole that kind of subtext is a little bit lost, but otherwise it's pretty spot on.
Nice.
Wait. Excellent.
That sounds good. Well, Craig, how about you?
Well, let's see. I am just finishing up right now, actually. I will be finished tomorrow. book 3 in the Aubrey Maturin series, the HMS Surprise.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that one.
I totally fell into this trap, which is bizarre and was really driving me insane nutty. The Aubrey Maturin series has been around so long that there are multiple audiobooks out there by different narrators.
Yes.
Book. I did not know that. And I have been listening to Patrick Tull, who has this awesome, cultivated, old British guy voice, who does really nice character work with different accents for the, like Maturin, who is Irish. He gives Maturin an Irish accent, which I love. And he's great with the action. He like gets in there like a good old-fashioned storyteller and really just digs his teeth into the action. So I did the first 2 books with him and then was really excited about getting the next one, and I just jumped on it and immediately was like, this is not the same guy. And this was the other guy who does it. His name is Simon Vance, who has a very, very upper-class, cultured British voice. He does nice character voices also, but they're different, obviously. And there was something that was like niggling the back of my head the whole time I was listening to this book. And I only figured it out today, and I only actually confirmed it right before we went and started recording because I wanted to make sure. He's the guy who does the narration for all the Dune books.
Oh, yeah.
Ah.
So it kept like I kept going, why do I like I want to hear like Harkonnen and like there's like all kinds of names that I'm like on the edge of hearing and I know I'm not hearing it. So he does an awesome job. It's just different, and I really love Patrick Tull's Maturin old Irish guy voice.
Yes.
I think when I go to book 4, which I will be downloading tonight after the show, I'm going to go back to Patrick Tull. But Simon Vance is awesome too, and it really just kind of confused me the heck out of it.
It's funny you mentioned that because I just recently finished listening to all of the Harry Dresden novels again.
Excellent.
And when I first started listening to them a few years ago, because they're great audiobooks to listen to in the car.
Yeah.
Because I've got a half-hour commute each way. And when I first started listening to him years ago, I'm like, who is this guy reading? It's just, and I looked him up. I'm like, James Marsters. I know that name from somewhere. And it took me like 3 books to realize it was Spike from Buffy.
Oh, nice. That's right. That's right. Spike does read those books. I did know that.
And then they change him up for Ghost Stories. It's a different guy because James Marsters couldn't do it. And I was like, oh my God, they better get him back. I miss him so much.
Yeah.
He is the voice of Dresden for me. And then they brought him back, so everything's good. But yeah, it was kind of crazy that how much someone's voice can kind of become part of your listening experience.
The same thing happened with the Game of Thrones audiobooks as well.
Yep.
They went from the original guy for one book, and then they went back to him again. And
Yes.
I believe they re-recorded the one that he didn't do, actually.
They did, actually, just recently. And that bothered me, too. And, speaking of all these audiobooks, Craig, where did you get your audiobooks from?
I get my audiobooks from audible.com, Russ.
That's right.
And I have to say, right now is the time to jump onto our deal. Go to our website, click on the get a free 30-day trial membership. You get 1 free book. And I've got to tell you, right now is the time because almost every science fiction series made into audiobooks, you can get the first book in almost every one of those series for $6.
That's right. So
And any membership, including the free 30-day membership, gets you in on that deal. So you could go in there, get one for free, or actually not even use that credit maybe at the moment until the sale is over because you want to jump on that. These books are literally going to cost you $20 to $40 if you get them at retail. They're going to cost you $6 for each first book, and it's only the first book, first taste free kind of thing. But
That's sneaky
great value, though.
and brilliant.
Great value. And don't forget, through our system, through the offer that Audible offers to our listeners, click on the Audible ad on the right-hand side of our page. You get free 30-day trial and a free Audible credit for pretty much any book in their library, and that book is yours to keep forever. And for the next 30 days, you also can get in on any of those great deals like the one Craig just mentioned for $6 for any of the first books in any of the great sci-fi series we've talked about on the show before.
Yep, absolutely.
So good stuff. And I had the same issue you guys ran into. I've been listening to, I just finished up Heroes by Joe Abercrombie, and now I'm moving on to The Red Country. I just restarted that. But all the books in his series are read by the same narrator except for Heroes, the last 2, and so it threw me off the same way. But now Red Country's got back to the original narrator, and I'm loving it again.
Oh, good.
So, yeah.
You guys are monsters. I'm signing up for audible.com right now.
There you go. You'll definitely want it. If you commute at all, it's definitely worth doing. So
I did it once for one. I thought I was going to be doing the whole, I'm just going to jump on and get one free book. And I've been a member ever since. And we don't get any discounts or anything from them. It's just we pay what everybody else pays, and it is so worth it.
Yep. But go through our website, click on our ad, and you'll get a free book. And Audible helps us out too for doing that. So that's great.
May I make a audiobook recommendation?
Oh, please do.
It's called Soon I Will Be Invincible.
Ooh.
It is I've read the book and then I listened to the audiobook because my friend and I were doing a road trip. It's the only time I've ever felt that the audiobook was better even than the book.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah, the whole thing is about two characters. Fatale, who's a cyborg, a woman who's become a cyborg, and it's just been brought up to basically an analogy of the Justice League, right? Mm-hmm. Superman, the character's name is Corefire. He's gone missing and she's come up and kind of is replacing him. And then Dr. Impossible, who is the villain. And the story is told through their narrative, kind of their epistles. And they use two different readers for each of them. And it was a fantastic listen.
Nice. That sounds awesome. Thanks. I'm going to put that on my list right now. I'm going to add it to my Audible wish list. So next time my credit comes up, I will get it.
Yep.
So what? Anything else, Craig, on your list there?
I'm still reading The Reality Dysfunction by Peter Hamilton, and it's still very, very heavy to the point where it's one of those things now where the story's at least starting to filter out, so I know like what direction the different characters are going in. But it suffers from something that really kind of stops my momentum in reading, where I'm desperately interested and intrigued by one group of characters and their story. And right now they're completely unrelated to the other half of the book, where I have little to no interest at all in what's happening to the other half of the characters. So I'll devour a chapter, and then the next chapter will shift story arcs, and I'll be like, oh god, and then I'll start flipping through White Dwarf magazines and stuff instead of reading the book. So I'm hoping that it all ties in soon and keeps me going. But right now I'm kind of like going in fits and starts. And that's pretty much all I got. Actually, I do have... The reason I'm not doing anything is because there's something huge on the horizon for me. And part of getting ready for that, I had to write the entire rest of the year's worth of comic books in 2 weeks.
Oh, nice. Achievement
so
for that.
I've been ridiculously busy writing comic books. And I found it's much cooler to write them all back to back to back to back to back because I'm actually able to do more of tying them all together and doing little touchbacks on little items and making sure the story flows. So I'm very happy with the way it's working. It's just taking forever.
Oh, nice. Well, I can't wait to read those. You can send that over to me if you want. I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, I'll do that. As soon as I get one, I'll give one to you. How's that?
Right, sounds awesome.
Okay.
Quickly. So longtime listeners will know that I am a huge fan of Star Trek. See that? I'm very excited for the new movie, which is coming out any moment now.
Fan?
What's that?
You're giving yourself an achievement just for being a fan?
A fan of Star Trek, yes. Anybody who's a fan of... This one's for you folks out there. Any truckers? So anyway, I'm such a fan that I am a glutton for punishment to the point where I actually pretty much buy every Star Trek video game that ever comes out. And any Star Trek fan will know that most Star Trek video games that come out aren't too good. So I just picked up, in a long line of progressions, I just picked up the latest Star Trek video game just called Star Trek, and it came out for the Xbox as well as some other platforms. And it's basically a extremely mediocre third-person shooter with nothing innovative at all in it, chock full of bugs, a few attempts at some really innovative levels that totally fail. But I don't care. I'm still loving it because it's Star Trek, and there's a couple scenes you get to be on the bridge, and the voice acting is all the actors from the movie, and the dialogue is actually not bad. And the premise of the game is you can play as either Kirk or Spock, but both Kirk and Spock are always together at the same time, so it's basically a co-op game. You can play by yourself, and one of them is computer-controlled, but because they're always together, they're always having the little repartee between each other, and it's actually that part of the game makes it worth dealing with. And the few scenes that Bones is in the game, he totally steals the show. Scotty has all the classic lines. That makes it worth playing, but otherwise it's really not a very good game, which is unfortunate because there are parts where it gets really, really close to being great and then just fails, which is a shame. But as a glutton for punishment that I am, I'm actually enjoying myself despite the game quality.
Have you read the Doctor Who Star Trek crossover comics?
I have only read one of them. Have you read most of those?
I read all the way through them. I enjoyed them.
You did you? I'll have to check those out. I have not. I've only seen the first, and I should read the rest.
The art style is very painterly, and it gives me a little bit of a pause. It kind of keeps jolting me out of the comic because I'm used to much more of a comic book style.
Yeah.
But that's not to bemoan its quality. It's just something I personally have.
Well, I am a fan of Doctor Who and Star Trek, so I don't know why they wouldn't work well together. I have to check that out.
They were pretty good. The Cybermen and the Borg crossover is the connection.
That's that makes a lot of sense. I'll check. Now I got to check that out. Just the bad guys. And since I mentioned a mediocre video game, I'd like to now mention two really, really good ones, especially if you're a miniature war gamer. These are both. I've been playing these both on the iPad. They're available on iOS. I don't know if they're available on Android, but check them out. One is called Leviathans: Warships. And this game is basically dystopian wars on the iPad. So you get these old school ships, but they have all the fancy stuff like they're naval ships like battleships and stuff, but they have shield generators. They have
Leviathans but
it's not based on the Catalyst game of the same name. It's not flying warships like the Leviathans game from Catalyst game. This is a different license. It's called Leviathans Warships, but they are water-going vessels like from World War II era stuff, but then they've got all these fancy high-tech weapons on them. And it's a very miniature game. It's turn-based. There's, you have points and you decide your fleet size and all that stuff. Really interesting game. The other game, though, and this game is quite possibly the best video game, tactical air combat video game I've ever played, period, bar none, is Sid Meier's Ace Patrol.
Ace Patrol?
Yes, Sid Meier's is in the guy that invented Civilization, the computer game. This Ace Patrol game is so good. It's basically Wings of War, the video game, with great graphics. You're on a hex board, and then what happens is each of your planes, when you move them, it shows you all the maneuvers you'd normally play from cards and like Wings of War on the board. But your guys gain levels, and they'll gain more maneuvers you can add to your quote-unquote deck. And when you get to move your plane, there's all these different patterns you can move them in. You can see them all there. You can learn Emmelmans and wingovers and all that stuff. And it's World War I era, so you're flying, the Sopwith Camel and everything, which I'm partial to because of Snoopy. I'm not going to lie. And it's just great because it really gets in there. There's a couple battles where you're one-on-one ace versus ace, and when your aces get really good, you have so many maneuvers in your deck. You're doing all these fake stalls and moving around, and really it feels so good when you outmaneuver your opponent and take them out. The AI is actually very good. There's some really interesting battles, like you're defending weather spotter balloons, and then you're attacking zeppelins, and you're defending trains and escorting tank convoys, and all these cool little things. Really, really tactical, great air combat game. I cannot speak highly enough. And it's a little intimidating because you get it as free, okay? But it looks like it's chock full of in-app purchases, which I know it can be a turnoff because it's like, I got to buy my way to victory, but that's not how they work. There's really only two kinds of purchases. There's the campaign purchases, which basically for $1, you get like 20 missions in different, so you can buy the British campaign, which is $1, and it's got like 20 missions in it, and then you can buy the American campaign, which is $1, and you get 20 more missions. So for $1, that's a pretty good deal. But it's free, so get it first and try out the little tutorial. But then there's also more in-app purchases, but those are just for like different skins for airplanes, so those don't really matter. You don't need to buy those. And then the last thing is you can buy, like when your pilot crashes, he goes down behind enemy lines and gets caught for a certain amount of time. You can basically buy him out of jail for cheap. So you can spend $1 and get a few tokens that'll get a guy rescued faster and stuff. But that's kind of cheating. That's the only part of the game that's a little cheaty. But basically, if you just buy the campaigns, you got a really, really good self-contained video game. For a couple bucks, you can have a great time with it. So definitely Ace Patrol is my recommendation.
I'll have to write that down.
So any other achievements?
I'm achieved out.
I think so.
Wasn't that enough?
I think so. Achievement for being achieved out.
You're listening to the D6 generation. Born to game.
Means it's our friends at Wolflair, Lone Wolf Development, who makes some of the best gaming software you'll ever want to see. Yeah, exactly. And Craig, you just got back into 40K again. 40K, a lot of intimidating rules about building lists. Did you have to dive back into your codexes and relearn all the list building rules? How did you handle that?
It was crazy, Russ. I got to tell you, I just threw a codex into my briefcase so that I could look at it during my free time at school, and I gave up. So much stuff, trying to do the math, trying to figure out who can do what and what can they do, and I don't know. And so I just went home and I went online, and literally in 15 minutes, I had my Space Wolf list all done up and ready to go.
Nice. And that's the best thing. I mean, Army Builder is a fantastic way to get your miniatures to the table without having to think about all those complicated rules. Get your lists exactly right. Other great products, Hero Lab just came out with their iPad version. They just released an update for that as well. Also, all kinds of cool stuff. They just added the Midgard Beastry package to Hero Lab for Pathfinder fans. They're always updating, always keeping it rocking. They've got the Realmworks beta. The Kickstarter just ended on that. We should be looking at that probably going live in a month or so.
Nice.
So yeah, which I can't wait. I've been playing it. The beta version has been fantastic. I can't wait for the full version. Card Vault for managing your collectible card games, keeping track of all your collection. Figuring out quickly what's the percentage of any card going to come up when I'm playing the game. All kinds of great tools. Really, just head over to wolflayer.com and check out what they've got going on there. You will not be sorry. There's some great software there. All of them easy to demo for free. Check them out first before you buy them. No risk. Great products. They're awesome.
Yep, absolutely.
And now, what's in the news? With the shout-out, full power to the forward shields. Fire torpedoes at their impulse engines. Engage! Cinematic Starship Combat. Find more at redweaverngames.com. Let's see, speaking of Cinematic Starship Combat, Chekhov will be at Gen Con. That's right. Be sure to say hi to him there. Anyway, moving on. First, City of Remnants, if you like that board game, and who doesn't? It's a great game from Playdot Games. Their FAQ is now live. If you've been busy battling out the gangs in the not-too-distant future, check that one out. Let's see, other news. Oh, if you've been following this whole Disney taking over LucasArts thing, you may notice, and also, of course, Lucasfilm, you may notice that they've announced a new Star Wars animated series called Star Wars Rebels. Will capture the look and feel and fun that both kids and their parents love about Star Wars. Apparently, it's coming out in 2014, and the early shots look like an X-Wing flying through a trench being attacked by a TIE fighter. So it looks like we're done with clones for a bit and back to the original 3 films. Also happening this week, Xbox One was announced, and you know all about that unless you were living under a rock. Oh, yeah! Wakeland, you very excited? Oh, it's going to be awesome! You're always excited, Wakeland. They just showed like the video capabilities of this thing. Oh, the good stuff's coming at E3. I guess you're right. The games will be at E3. So a couple weeks away to hear more about what kind of gaming you can do with this new Xbox One thing. Speaking of video games, a couple big video game announcements. Warhammer 40,000 Armageddon will be coming to PC and to the iPad. Don't know much about this yet, but it's going to be a turn-based strategy game with hexes, some kind of branching campaign with like 30 scenarios. And players will be able to play either, they will be playing the Imperial Guard Steel Legion forces, of course, versus the Orcs, the famous Battle of Armageddon. So we'll see what that's going to be like coming soon, I guess. Sounds a little retro, but could be fun. Also coming to iOS very soon, according to Eurogamer.net, the turn-based classic Warhammer Quest will be coming to iOS this Thursday, May 30th. So by the time you hear this, it may already be out. So check that out. If you're an iOS fan and you're a Warhammer Quest fan, you don't want to miss that one. Another news, a War Machine novel. The folks at Skull Island Expeditions have been publishing some great novellas. Now the first novel is out and available to download to an e-reader of your choice, Dark Convergence. And the tagline of this one says, Artificer General Sebastian Nemo has faced myriad dangers while serving his king and kingdom, but none so fascinating and sinister as the convergence of Chris. So we'll see what happens with that. Lots of great fluff on that latest No Quarter magazine as well. If you're excited about the new faction, plenty of ways to get involved with it. Speaking of fluff and books, Wild West Exodus books have been announced. That's right. Our friends at Winged Hussar Publishing, you know that sponsor of the show there, that does all the historical novels. Well, they just announced a partnership with Outlaw Miniatures, and in this partnership they're announcing they'll be publishing 3 novels based on the Wild West Exodus universe. That's going to be publishing really, really rapidly, like really quickly. I feel bad for these authors who got to write so quickly, actually. These are going to be called the Jesse James Archives, and they'll be entitled Honor Among Thieves, which is due out October 2013, An Outlaw's Wrath, which is due out in November 2013, and Abundant Riches, which is due out in December 2013. So basically a book a month between now and then. Hopefully they're already written. Oh, and you might know some of these authors. So the first book, Honor Among Thieves, and the last book, Abundant Riches, those are by our very own Craig Gallant. That's right. Thank you. Good job, Craig. And the middle book, An Outlaw's Wrath, is by C.L. Werner. Let's see here. Here's kind of some sad news. Spartan Games has announced they are canceling Uncharted Seas. They have a long, very in-depth post about it if you'd like to read about it over their website. But basically, in the last 5 years since they launched Uncharted Seas, they have moved on to focus on their bigger selling games such as Dystopian Wars, Dystopian Legions, and Firestorm Armada. So there you have it. So it's July 1st will be the official last day where they can sell Uncharted Seas through their website. And then finally, here's some interesting news that you folks might like to hear. A recent article came out showing the top 10 tabletop Kickstarters. So let's take a look at the top 10 tabletop Kickstarters. Here we go. Making the most money. So these are tabletop. These are Kickstarters that were somehow involved in our hobby: board games, miniature games, or usually miniature games actually, or somehow ancillary parts. So number one, the number one grossing Kickstarter so far, Dark Heaven Bones minis by Reaper Miniatures. The old, of course, Reaper Bones, everybody calls it. Grossed $3.4 million. That's number one. Number two grossing gaming Kickstarter is Zombicide Season 2, bringing in $2.2 million. Not a bad haul. Also by Cool Mini or Not. So first was Reaper Bones. Number two is Cool Mini or Not. Number three, Kingdom Death Monster by the Kingdom Death folks. That was almost 2.0 million, right about $2 million there. Another good haul. Number four, Game Tiles by Dwarven Forge at $1.9 million. Not really a game, but gamers use them, so okay, we'll allow it. Number five, the one that ended that Wakelum was already excited about. Oh, Robotech! That's right, Robotech RPG Tactics by our friends at Paladin Books. They made $1.4 million on that Kickstarter. And we have Sedition Wars, Battle for Alabaster by Cool Mini or Not as well. $951,000 on that one. Myth Miniatures by the Mercs folks at $926,000. Then you have Ogre from folks at Steve Jackson Games, $923,000. Relic Knights by Cool Mini or Not at $909,000. And number 10, top grossing Kickstarter so far, is Zombicide by Cool Mini or Not, also at $781,000. And again, these are the top grossing Kickstarters for gaming. I thought it was pretty interesting. And that's what's in the news.
And we've got some interesting news from Winged Hussar Publishing.
I'll say it's interesting. Holy mackerel.
It is interesting. And it is a something of a special announcement here. Actually, this announcement just went out today. Today is the 22nd of May.
Ooh.
As we're recording. And this announcement just went out. Let me see if I can find the announcement. That's Winged Hussar Publishing, LLC, is excited to announce an agreement with Outlaw Miniatures to publish a series of books based in the world of their game.
Ooh.
Now, someone that you know is writing 2 of the 3 first books.
Well, Craig, that's awesome. Congratulations. You have a book deal with our friends at Winged Hussar Publishing.
Indeed. And it is through the imprint they have 2 imprints. They have a history imprint, and they have an imprint for epic science fiction and fantasy called ZMOC Books. Mm-hmm. So this will be coming under the ZMOC Books imprint, and very exciting. I cannot tell you. This is like huge, massive bucket list exciting, obviously. This is it. This is what I've been building up towards. Very daunting, very exciting. Vincent at Winged Hussar has been very helpful and just awesome all the way through. He was editing for the rule book for Wild West Exodus, so he saw a lot of my work early on and was fully supportive of my ability to take this on. So I'm very excited. And these books should be coming out relatively soon, frighteningly so. In fact, October. There's 3 books, October, November, and December, and they were kind enough to hire someone to write the middle book so that I would only have to write the first and the last book. So that's 2 books in the next, 6 months, 7 months?
That's a lot of writing, Craig.
That's a lot of writing.
You're going to get busy.
I better start tomorrow.
So if you want to get information on this, you can go to wingedhussarpublishing.com. And don't forget, if you put in the code D6G for any of their great historical books or this new upcoming stuff coming from them, you get save 5% off your order.
Yep.
You're listening to the D6 generation. Born to game.
Welcome back. Now, unless you've had your head in the sand or are simply not a miniatures gamer, which is fine, There are those you out here who don't play miniature games, and that's okay.
Have to be not a miniatures gamer and not a Malifaux player.
Right, but if you are in any way remotely familiar with the game Malifaux, you have probably heard the big recent announcement that Malifaux version 2, Mac, is it called version 2? Is that the official version?
I think we're calling it Malifaux Second Edition.
Second Edition, thank you. So Malifaux Second Edition is on the streets, and Mack Martin here, who, if you remember, we talked to last year about Dust, is now back to talk with us about the new hotness here, what's going on, what the changes are, what the big to-do is about this whole Malifaux Second Edition thing, right? So
very exciting.
So, Max, so how did you go from? Let's just get the groundwork here. How did you?
Let's look at your tracks from where we were a year ago.
How did you a year ago go from being Fantasy Flight dude working on Dust Tactics to all of a sudden, or Warfare, excuse me, to all of a sudden now you're rewriting Malifaux? What happened there?
You know, it's funny. A lot of people think there's a ton of drama there or something, but honestly, it's the silliest thing. My grandmother was looking for someone to move in and help her out until one of my cousins in a few months is ready to go to college, and I was just kind of putzing around, and my girlfriend and I played a lot of Malifaux together, and she pointed out to me that Wyrd was hiring, and I was like, well, unless they're in my hometown, I really, I can't see myself leaving FFG. I love it here, but man, if I was going to work for any other company, it would be Wyrd. That'd be fantastic. I do love Malifaux. And then she said, well, is Placerville near Sacramento? And I'm like, crap, it's like 20 minutes away.
Uh-huh.
So I applied for the job just thinking, worst case scenario, I do miss my family. Minnesota, the people are great, but the weather is the apocalypse. So I was like, I'll throw my hat in the ring and we'll see what happens. So, I did get the job, and I did move back to California, help my grandma out for a few months, about a year now. And then when my, cousin goes off to college, he'll come here and I'll get my own apartment up here in Placerville. And that's just kind of all there really is to it. It's not really drama so much as Wyrd is really close to my family, and it's a great place to be, and I love the company, and it's a different different corporate culture, different kind of group here, but I couldn't even tell you which one I like better. So it's totally nothing dramatic.
Well, that's awesome. Now, when you were applying, did you know you were applying for, or did you think you were applying for the RPG job? Were you applying for did you know there was a Malifaux version 2 coming out, or what was did you know you were getting into both those things, or how did that happen?
Well, I didn't know version 2 was coming out. I knew that they were looking for someone to do the role-playing game, and I've been doing the Dark Heresy role-playing game for a while. So, who better to, design and develop a role-playing game based on a miniatures property than a guy who's been designing and developing role-playing games based on miniatures properties.
Right.
So I said, I applied for the RPG gig because I thought I'd get it, and I did. Looking back, I maybe should have applied for the miniatures position because I'm doing that a lot too.
Right. So they got 2 for 1, which is always a good win for them. So that was you're a good hire, apparently.
That's basically what it boiled down to. Is we had a lot of external people at Wyrd who were not here in the office, and then Wyrd is opening up the office. So a lot of the grunt labor, a lot of the long nights just kind of had to fall to me right now while the company is still in that expansion growing phase.
Nice. So you went in and you got into the. So how did it go from, or when did your version 2 work start? How long have you been on that?
Well, Dan Weber and Justin Gibbs have kind of been looking at it and working on it and massaging it now for a while, and a lot of the guys, Eric and Nathan and so forth, have been kind of knowing that second edition needs to happen. But I would say I really started just designing and working and just making everything happen. Well, Justin's right here. Justin, when did we start our internal play tests and goofing off? What, last August? Like August, September-ish?
That's probably about right.
Yeah, so about August, September-ish. I mean, we got the first draft from Dan Weber early this year, but we were sending notes and kind of just putzing around with it and trying to make sure we knew what we were doing September, late August last year.
Wow. And so so it sounds like a lot of fingers have been in the pie. Who's been involved in the total, I guess it's we'll get more in details on how epic it is, but who's been involved in the version 2 mechanics so far?
Well, here in the office, we have 7 people, and all of us have been working on it, with Justin and I kind of taking the lead. Mm-hmm. And then Dan Weber did the initial draft, and we've just kind of been running with it from there to get everything ready for a Gen Con release or for a Gen Con pre-release.
Right. Yeah, that's the big rumor. So more about that in a bit. So I guess the big question a lot of people are going to ask is, why Mark II and why now? What was sort of the driving force behind we need to rethink the rules or reboot the rule system?
Well, it was just kind of time for that big kind of tonal shift to make it a little more accessible, to make it more streamlined, bring back some of the players who maybe quit because it got a little complicated, or maybe give them just something fresh to spicing it up. And now was the time, because if we kept doing more and more books, we would have kind of added to the rules and kind of massaged and kept it going. But it wouldn't really, it's a beautiful house. We need to knock some walls down and shore up the frame a little bit to make sure that this thing holds and is fun and clean to play for years to come.
Yeah, that
so
seems
the sooner the better.
Yeah, I guess that seems sort of like a pattern. We see that a lot with miniature games. I guess as you start to add on, and the game gets bigger, is it sort of that some of the strengths get stronger, but also the weaknesses become more apparent, and you kind of decide when do you have to make the move to sort of fix the foundation? Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah, and that's what happened here. And I'm pretty good at building a foundation that will work a little bit longer. So a lot of the changes we're making are really designed so that we don't have to do a new edition right away, and that we don't have to update the rules with massive erratas. Obviously, erratas and FAQs are going to happen. Those two are different things. I know a lot of people bleed them together, but FAQs are literally just questions that a lot of people ask, so we need to give answers, and then errata are changes to the rules. So those are going to happen a little bit here and there, but we're trying to build a system that will need less of them and that we can kind of adjust and massage on the fly.
All right, I get it. So what were some of you sort of hinted at, simplification and maybe, reduce the FAQs, but what were some of the core design goals when the first folks started on this and you guys now are taking it to the finish line here? What were some of this is the goal of version 2?
Basically making the game much more intuitive, so that once the players learn the rules, they can read the cards and get everything they need from the cards, so that they don't have to flip back and forth to the book as much. So just anything we can do to push the complexity to optional complexity. We don't want to simplify the game. We want to streamline it. We want a new player to not be presented with as much information, and that the amount of information they have in their kind of their wheelhouse grows as they go. So for the most part, it was tough because it was a streamlining, right? We wanted to streamline without simplifying and without just cutting chunks of it away. And we wanted to kind of focus on what is core to Malifaux, which is player interaction, not just kind of killing each other, but really focusing on the missions and how the models move and interact, and the interesting kind of complex interactions without the fiddly interactions, if that makes sense.
I think so. So is this, and to be clear, this is a complete rewrite, right? Is there going to be any backward compatibility, or is it pretty much if you're either going to play the old version of Malifaux or you're playing version 2, and there's no compatibility across the two versions?
It is a new version. There is no backwards compatibility. Okay. That is correct.
So the people will need to get the new versions, the new cards, if you will, of their characters, their favorite characters, if they want to play in version 2.
You'll have all the information in the book. In the first book, we're going to be doing 3 masters from each faction. And then shortly thereafter, when we actually launch in January, you'll be able to get faction packs that will have all the cards for your faction. And that way we can get you all those cards very, very quickly and kind of stage up through our playtest, which will start in January or in May. I guess the end of this month. So
playtest. Oh wow, yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. We've got the public playtest starting, and so you'll be able to start seeing things, but then they'll be cemented and coming out from here until the beginning of next year, and then next year M2E will go live.
Okay.
Now Mac, riffing off something that you just said, how long will the second edition rules only be supported by 3 masters before everybody can start using all of their old stuff? How long are they going to be using those 3 masters and only be choosing those 3?
Oh, not long at all. Here's the timeline we're going to run with. In the end of this month, we're going to release the public beta. Now, the public beta is just that. It's 3 masters from each faction and the rule book. And we're just going to, we want you guys to run with it and test the crap out of those to kind of make sure that those models are kind of tight and make sense and are very clear, and that the rules themselves are very clear, and we didn't, miss anything that only 1,000 people banging on it can really tell us. Then that will kind of get locked in and will become available at Gen Con. You'll be able to buy the book, and that book will include those models. Directly after Gen Con, which is August, so like September, early September, maybe early October, if it takes us that long, we will begin the second beta. And Beta Wave 2 will be every model in existence that wasn't in the beta test.
Wow.
So you'll have everything that was in the first beta test, and then you'll be able to beta test everything else from October till December.
Okay.
Nice.
Okay. So
late September, early October, all the way until December.
gotcha. And it'll be beta, but there will be those rules that you can use all those other models with.
Right. You'll be able to at least play with your models and help us test them. And then early 2014, when we go with the full release, that's when all of that will get locked in, and you'll be able to buy the cards and everything.
And not to put words in your mouth, but I would assume that people who are frustrated that you didn't go with the Privateer Press Mark II deck of cards right off the bat, right at launch with everybody in them, that is a much bigger company than Wyrd. And what you're trying to do is actually leverage your consumer base to actually help you with that, so that you've got the best product you can when it gets to its final form, would be my guess.
Oh, when it goes to its final launch in 2014, you'll be able to get faction decks of cards.
Right.
Right.
But
Which is every card for your faction.
when they did Mark II for War Machine, and Russ, correct me if I'm wrong, right at launch, there were every existing model had cards right out of the launch, right?
Well, yeah, but
for the beta, yeah.
Yeah, but to be clear though, the official launch isn't until next year. So technically, Wyrd is, if I'm understanding you correctly, Mac, since it's not officially launched until January, whenever it is, whenever it is.
But the rules launch in August.
Yeah, the pre-release rules, right? Yeah. So like they yeah, you're right. So in the beta for Privateer, everything was available all the time. You're right. And then when the game launched, the decks were all available. Yeah, so it was a little earlier, but it sounds like you guys are trying to get as close as you can without killing yourselves. So that seems fair.
Well, we also have something like 200 models.
Right.
Every individual different model has its own rules.
Right. Now let's talk about some specific changes here and get into details now. That's a great overview. So if you had to say, like, if I was going to play version 2 tomorrow, if the beta rules got in front of me and I was ready to jump in and start playing, like, what's the biggest change that's going to hit me right off the bat as a veteran Malifaux player? Am I going to go, oh wow, well, that's different? Is there going to be anything that jumps out at me, or is it going to be a bunch of little subtle things, or what's the big change?
I think the big one is the way Soulstones work.
Okay.
In the past, Soulstones used to be able to give you basically a total on your master, because your master could spend Soulstones to get extra card flips, or to get an extra card that added into their flip. And that would create totals that enemy minions and non-Soulstone users just actually couldn't even touch.
Right.
And that's gone away. So you're going to see that your master is less of a sack of hammers and more a really powerful tool, but it's no longer this beast that you can just run into the middle of combats and just wail on people. Because honestly, that mechanic was a lot leaning towards masters that were designed to kill, like Lady Justice or Lilith, who were just really good at melee combat,
right.
And some of the support masters were falling behind. So that's been readjusted, and the way Soulstones interact and the way they use has been overhauled. So it's less about raw power and more about getting that spell off when you need it, or getting that suit when you need it.
Okay, well, that's cool. So it's basically more of a leveling of that, which is interesting, because I remember when I first played the game, one of the challenges that Rafe had getting into it was he had picked a caster that was more of a support caster, and I had Perdita. So I was just gunning him down, and he didn't, because Perdita's got a very straightforward playstyle, right? Just shoot him like crazy and boost all your attacks, and you're good. And he had a little trouble getting into that, and I think it kind of turned him off to the game a little bit. So I think that leveling is probably not a bad call. Go
You
ahead.
can still use your soul stones to augment your attacks, but not nearly as much.
Okay.
It just adds a positive flip rather than adding in the flip, so you get to flip an extra card.
Right.
Or you can use it to generate a suit that you just add into your total, which is always
That's nice.
convenient.
So you need that. You need that RAM. You can get it when you need it. Right. That's awesome.
Yeah. And you can spend a soul stone when you're drawing cards at the beginning of the turn. You can spend a soul stone to draw 2 extra cards and discard 2 cards.
Ooh, that's
so support masters can kind of filter their hand a little bit.
So the soul stones become more. That makes sense. If you think about it, the support casters, the soul stones didn't really boost them as much as it boosted a combat caster. Now they boost both, but just in a subtly different way. That's cool.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
Kind of equalize the way soul stones work between the two.
That sounds cool.
Is the the effect of that is as you said, it's gonna reduce the effectiveness of the masters. Is that goal? Set, match, done, or are there other things that your revision is going to do that will, like, this will tone down masters? Is there something else that will boost them back up above everybody else, or is it kind of like we felt the masters were way overpowerful and they just needed to be dragged down, not dragged down, but leveled, period?
Well, a lot of it wasn't so much toning down the masters so much as it was equalizing the masters between themselves. Lady Justice, for instance, is still wading into enemy models and pulling them apart. They still have prevention flips, that sort of thing. So it's not so much that the masters are weaker; they're just more in tone with each other. And it is, and a master isn't suddenly invulnerable. To solve that, to keep them kind of alive a little longer, almost all the masters have gone up in the number of wounds they have.
There you go.
Considerably. In some cases, some of them have 12 wounds.
Wow. So they're a little beefier, but they can't defend themselves as well with their soul stones. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And you talked about right up front, one of the goals was to streamline the game. And I personally love the card mechanics in Malifaux and the hand management. I like the idea. My ears immediately perked up when he talked about soul stones can be used for hand management a little more and stuff like that. That's really exciting because I love the fact that you can mitigate luck in Malifaux by managing your hand and get that great, quote unquote die roll when you need it. Has there been any work in streamlining the combat system? It does sort of slow the game down as you go through the cards and try to figure out all your modifiers. Have you guys focused any work in that area, and if so, how?
Absolutely. One of the quickest things I did is I changed the format that attacks and other actions are listed in. So now they're all on one side of the card rather than flipping and opening and flipping back and forth. And it lists everything you need for an action right in the action. It starts with the statistic value that you're going to use, that stat value. So it just right away says, melee, shooting, casting, final number. Takes all of the math from anywhere on the card, gives you the final number rather than showing it in multiple places.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's nice.
Then it gives you your set target number. It gives you what they're resisting with. It gives it all in this kind of stat line.
Yeah.
Then it just describes the spell, and then it lists every trigger for that spell. So it's all in one place, and you're not flipping back and forth between the trigger section and the attack section and that sort of thing. It also goes much faster because spells do not work different than other attacks.
Oh, that's nice.
Any action can have a target number where if you don't beat that target number, you can't cast the spell, right? Even if you beat your opponent, if you don't also beat the target number, you can't. You fail. But other than that, it's more or less the same system. A lot of hand management, a lot of mitigating luck with timing and resources. But it should be a lot faster, a lot smoother.
Nice. That sounds great because that was, and I like the idea of putting them together. I do remember constantly flipping my cards around and back and forth. Are the cards still going to be sort of that extra wide format, or did you guys get them down to a single card size, or have you finalized that?
We've got them down currently to a single card size.
Okay.
We're still talking to production right now. If it's a single card size to get sleeved or so forth, that'll be best. But we may also go up a little bit on their size to make them more readable. And if we do that, we'll do them in plastics so that you can literally just use a dry erase right on the card and then wipe it off.
Ooh, that'd be cool. Oh, I like that.
So it's just a matter of talking to production and seeing what all our options are.
Figuring it out. All right, cool. Now, another thing that obviously slows the game down a little bit is how many choices you have per model. Have you guys, and that was something that obviously Privateer went through with War Machine, they really went through and kind of streamlined a lot of the options up per model. Have you guys gone through a similar process with Malifaux?
Well, we have a lot fewer models on the table than other miniatures games, And the comparison I hear a lot is that one of our models is like a unit in another game.
Yeah.
So we didn't remove a ton of options so much as just made those options a lot more clear.
Okay.
And it won't take you nearly as long to decide when you're going to have your Death Marshal shoot his Peacebringer or when the Terror Tot's going to run up and do its thing.
Okay.
And then with Masters, we've streamlined them a little bit by using the upgrade system to kind of shuffle some of the optional complexity to later cards. So as you get better with the model, you can then, okay, I'm comfortable with everything that's on my model. Now let's bring in some more rules. Let's bring in some more rules. And you can even swap those out. So you'll end up with more options in the long term, but you'll have less you have to memorize and focus at any given point.
Well, you mentioned it. Let's talk about it. So what's the scoop with this upgrade system? What is that about?
Well, it's pretty straightforward. Different models have a different number of upgrades they can have. Masters can have 3, henchmen and enforcers can have 2, minions can have 1, and peons can't have any.
Okay.
And they're literally exactly what they sound like. You pay a couple points, and you get a new ability. Let me see if I can actually open one up real quick and give you an example.
Oh, cool.
I'm here at my computer. Let me just see if there's... Let's see. How about some Resurrectionist upgrades?
Always good. You know, you can also tell me what Perditas are. That's fine. Just while you're in there.
Well, I would, but guild upgrades aren't in my little...
Oh, well, that's a problem.
Because I have so many files. Okay, here's a great example. Madame Sybil has a ability called Bleeding Tongue, so she can upgrade her, take an upgrade that gives her Bleeder Lash, the Comply ability, which lets her able to attack somebody and then make them take a 1 AP action. Or let's take a look at the generic one. So any master in the scrolling down. Oh, let me find my favorite one. So any master in the Resurrectionist can take the Maniacal Laugh upgrade.
Yeah.
And it simply reads this. This model gains the following tactical action: 0, Mwahahaha. Casting 6 crows, target number 13 crow.
Yeah.
Range pulse 8. Summon 1 mindless zombie into base contact with each corpse marker in range, then discard all corpse markers in range. Mindless zombies may not count as a corpse marker for this action. So
cool.
Basically, just every corpse marker that's on the ground, boom, becomes a mindless zombie, and they just, make their maniacal laugh and summon a bunch of zombies.
So how do you pay for the upgrades? Do they cost extra soul stones, or does everybody just agree everybody gets one upgrade, or how does that all work?
This one's 2. This one, for instance, is 2 soul stones.
Okay, and the upgrades are model specific, so each model's got their own list of upgrades to choose from.
Some models have their own upgrades. Some are faction upgrades. The one I just read you was any master,
cool.
and the Rezzers can take it. But right below it is Bag of Tools, which is one that only Seamus can take.
Nice. So it's kind of like that's really neat. It's customizing your models. Now these upgrades aren't something you would represent on your models, right? These are just things that you can take or not take. There's not like
the idea is you do not have to model to take these upgrades. They're not war gear, right? You're not adding a sword to the character. Even Ophelia, who has a bunch of upgrades that are weapons, her model has a bunch of crazy weapons on her, so it won't be really an issue. She has a bag of weapons, and it's not something you need to model.
Right. Well, that's cool. That sounds really neat. So what are there, going through this, right, everybody's got, and the big thing everybody's always afraid of whenever there's a rewrite is, are they going to nerf my favorite caster? Or the converse, are they going to do something about that overpowered thing, right? Did you guys have a list of those kind of things? Has there been any, do you have any examples of what you had to kind of break? I mean, you already mentioned sort of the idea of soul stones being too powerful, but were there specific factions or models that you were kind of like on your short list of these need to be helped out or these need to be brought down a little bit?
We didn't really focus on it that way. Okay. We know that those imbalances exist in version 1, but version 2 is such a major tonal shift in the way the rules are written and the way we can deal with those problems that a lot of the characters, just the full rewrite and rebalance solved all of that issue because points totals change, rules change. Everything was on the adjustment table. So we just made sure as we went through our early beta testing and alpha testing that we tried to whip everything into shape. And right now we feel it's in a pretty decent spot.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's still work to be done, and a lot of that will get done when we go to public beta.
Cool.
But no, we're not trying to ruin anyone's masters.
I know. Is Perdita doing fine? Is she okay? I'm going to ask about Perdita a lot, so I don't know. It's just a question. People are asking me about it. It's nothing personal. It's not because it's my only master. It's nothing to do with that. It's just general,
You're going to see a shift in Perdita, the biggest being that the companion rule has changed.
Oh.
First of all, companion has been streamlined. So now it has 2 abilities. One is companion, one is accomplice.
Mm-hmm.
One happens after a friendly model activates. One happens... basically, accomplice allows another model to activate after this model activates.
Okay.
And companion allows this model to activate after another friendly model activates. And it's got a range on it instead of actually being linked to another thing.
Yeah.
So it's no longer, companion family, it just says companion, and it's whenever a friendly model finishes its activation within 6 inches of this model may activate immediately.
Right.
And you're never allowed to do more than 2 of those in a row. Mm-hmm. So you never get to go more than twice before your opponent goes. So you're going to see a lot of rebalancing with the family specifically around that idea. So
right.
Perdita won't be doing this chain of 5 or 6 models anymore. Instead, they're designed to work in pairs, and you'll see pairs of gunfighters running around working together.
Oh, cool. That's really actually pretty neat.
And they buff each other based on which pairs. So, like, each of them has this little buff they hand out to one guy within range. We're pretty happy with it.
I can't wait to try that out. So let me ask you this. So there's been a lot of, I've seen on the internets, and, obviously you guys have been making the rounds with other podcasts, and some things come up. One of the things I've heard is optional complexity is sort of like a buzzword around the new version 2. What do you guys mean by optional complexity? What's that about?
Well, to be frank, the game was a little too complex for new players. The complexity really works at the high level of play, at the tournament play, when you really get good. But a new player sees a lot of information, and they're being thrown into the deep end very, very, very quickly. To the point where players who don't play often kind of feel confused in almost every game they play, and that's not a fun experience.
Right.
So what we've done is we've streamlined what's on the card itself so that it's easier to read, easier to find, and then we've moved a lot of the most complex actions onto upgrades, so that you don't see them every time, and you have to you have to purchase them, and hopefully your opponent purchases them. When they purchase them, you can actually just look at the card. It'll be in nice, clean text, and it'll look much smoother than it does currently.
Nice.
So it's just making it so that if you want to play a very simple demo game, or you and your friend just do not like, throwing in a bunch of extra stuff, you can keep it simple, and it allows the kind of the play group to tailor the complexity to
nice. I like
to what
that.
they're comfortable
So you're basically kind of like it's the best of both worlds. You're optionally reducing the amount of options on a character, but you can always bring them back or even bring more in with these upgrades. Now, are the upgrades their own little cards that I can add to my sort of put next to my model's main card and say, okay, this is Perdita, and here's her optional upgrade next to it?
Yep.
Oh, cool.
That's exactly what it is.
Nice. Well, that's going to be slick. So I can just go through the deck of cards and look all the upgrades, and the points are right on them. I can just figure, the soul stone cost is right on them, so I can just figure out what I want to take and what I want to leave behind.
That's exactly the goal. And one of the other tricks is there aren't actually a ton of them.
Yeah.
When you're, for instance, once you've decided you're playing Perdita, that will quickly pare down the number of upgrade options you have. You won't be looking through 40 cards. Perdita has her 4 upgrades. There are 3 master upgrades. She's got a couple upgrades for her family. And that's it, right? It's like you're looking through maybe 7 or 8 upgrades, maybe 10 upgrades to really decide what you're going to take during this game. Now, that will grow maybe in the future when we do expansions and that sort of thing, but it's not going to grow by leaps and bounds. You're not suddenly going to have to shuffle through a deck of 30 upgrades.
Nice. That sounds cool. I like that. I like that approach a lot, and it gives I like the idea of having different upgrade availabilities, even for named characters in a system. I think that's really fun. So that's a neat option. Let me ask you this. So whenever a game company comes out with a brand new rule book, right? So I assume you guys are going to republish the main Malifaux rule book, and it'll be Malifaux version 2.
Yep.
Is this going to be new art and new fluff, or is it going to be the same art and fluff, just new rules, or how are you guys going to handle that that situation?
Oh, new art, new fluff.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
We're not rewriting any fluff. We're not going back and retconning. We're moving the storyline forward. Okay. We're gonna have some fluff that brings you up to speed if you're a new player.
Yeah.
So your old books will still be worth something because they still have all those old stories, and that storyline will simply continue. We're actually picking up, I think, I forget how long after, but we're picking up a little bit after the events in book 4.
Nice.
And we're tying up a lot of loose ends. It's going to be a lot of fun. I just got to read the outline for what happens with Sonya, and it's pretty great.
Oh, that's awesome. So it's great. So it is new content for veteran players as well as a great way to get new guys in. That's awesome. That's great. And is there going to be any kind of a upgrade path without buying the book? You know, originally Malifaux had the little PDF version for free. Is there any kind of option there, or is it pretty much you're going to have to get the new book if you want to play version 2?
To be honest, I'm not certain how all that's going to work out. That's kind of in the hands of my boss, Nathan.
Okay.
He kind of handles all that bit. So, I mean, I know I really like the digest-sized books, and I'd like to see them continue. And I know they're good sellers, and Eric and Nathan like them.
Okay.
I just don't know what we're juggling a lot of stuff. We got a lot of work to do right now, so that's just kind of something that I haven't asked about or really, put on my one of my mini spinning plates.
Okay. Yeah, it's not you're not doing enough there, Mac. Come on.
Right.
Chop chop.
Now, Mac, with this book now being the sort of the new baseline rule book, and advancing the fluff, which is awesome and something that Wyrd is known for in a very good way. Is there any plan to collect the fluff from the previous rule books when they go away, or is it just going to be new guys are just going to have to hear about the legends from the old guys kind of thing?
I am absolutely, completely, 100% no idea. That's, again, I'm so focused on getting the rules and making sure the books actually happen that going back and doing that sort of thing is a little outside my...
Gotcha. Could you go hallway and ask somebody else?
Unfortunately, they've all gone home. I'm staying late after work for this. So.
No, we appreciate that. See, we do appreciate that.
We do appreciate
I do know we have the Wyrd Chronicles, and if we're gonna either release these stories in a digest format, like all of the stories in one. We could also put them in the Malifaux Chronicles so that they are available. Or it might be one of those things where you better pick up your version 1 books now or borrow them from a friend. I just don't know what the plan is, to be honest.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, let me jump back in on some rule quests. We already talked about that. All the new rules are coming out at the same time for all the models. Basically, when next year gets here, and you're going to have faction decks. Do you guys know yet how you're going to handle rebringing the factions up to speed? Are you going to go the faction book route? Are you going to keep doing the expansion books like you've been doing? Have you gotten to that point yet with how version 2 is going to handle bringing in all the backstory and everything of all the various factions?
No, not yet. I can tell you what I'd like to do if I had my druthers, but really it's a matter of what we think the fans will like best. And I think, just from my own, in my head, I think both would work very, very well. Mm-hmm. I think a faction book that includes all of your models and then a lot of narrative encounter stuff, like a lot of narrative story gaming, stuff would be great. Be a great way to bring in, master specific schemes and that sort of thing for narrative play. Obviously not for competitive play, it gets a little wonky, but for narrative play, it's great. And that'd be a great way to do that. But at the same time, we need to promote competitive play and organized play, and that's best done through a book that works for everyone. So it's really just a matter. Maybe we'll do a little bit of both. Maybe we'll stick with our current format. Right now, we're so focused on making sure version 2 comes out as great as possible that kind of figuring out that next step isn't
too far down the road.
Isn't something I'm running at yet.
Makes sense. And you said before, I think, but I want to make sure it's clear. No existing models today are being deprecated. That is, there'll be cards for everybody that's out now. Or are there any models that will not get rules in version 2?
Technically, there are 2 models that don't get rules.
Okay.
3 technically, but they are still usable as models in the game. The minion versions of Hamlin and Misaki, or Mifei? Misaki, I was right. Okay, good. Yeah, I always... They're both M's. Misaki and Hamlin will be... you can use them as the master versions of those 2 models, but there won't be minion versions of them any longer. The storyline has moved forward, and they no longer are minions. As well, I'm not certain. There's a chance that Candy the Petulant Youth will just be Candy. That model will be something fun and clever that you can put on the table, but it still counts as Candy. I'm not certain about that one though. That's simply a where the cards are at right now.
Okay, so 3 at risk, but they're kind of okay. That's cool. That's fair.
You'll still be able to play with your model. Yeah. They're not going away.
Right. And so we talked about that. So great. So one thing you mentioned, the mission system. Are there any major changes to the mission system and how that's going to function?
Yes.
Oh, what? Could you give an example?
Should I elaborate?
Yes, please do.
One of the things that we noticed in version 1 is that even with cleanup, even with adjusting what, a lot of players, how do I explain this one? This is the most complicated change we made, and it took us the longest time to internally test it. One of the things we noticed in V1 was that players were taking the same schemes over and over and over again. Now, a lot of the fans or a lot of the testers that we were talking to felt that all we needed to do was clean up those schemes so that they were so that they were better balanced. But the truth of the matter is that no matter what we do, there's still an optimal scheme for your master. Right? Certain masters are better at certain schemes, and what that would end up meaning is this master always takes these schemes. Right? And we wanted to avoid that. Now, currently in a lot of tournament play, the way they solved this was to restrict you to only be able to use the schemes once, and then it went away, and you had to choose a new scheme every round. Right. We felt that was a little bit track heavy. You had to track it for each round and each player, and what if someone forgot? And now this guy's getting accused of cheating and all that kind of stuff. And we've shifted it a little bit towards a more symmetric on the points and on the what's available, but the focus is on what you selected out of that symmetry. So it's still very asymmetrical, where both players have the same choices, right? It's all choice based rather than random. What you do is at the beginning of every encounter, you flip a card to choose one of the 4. It's based on the suits. Strategies. And this is a shared strategy that both players... No, sorry, there's 5, right? Do we have 5 strategies or 4? 5, okay. There's 5 strategies. Jokers have 1 too.
Okay.
So you flip a card and you get your strategy. And this is a shared strategy that the two of you are both going for. Okay. It's scored at the end of every round, and no player can ever earn more than 4 points from it. Okay. So if you earned your 4 points, all you can hope to do is stop your opponent from getting his 4. Then, after you've generated the strategy, you flip 2 cards to determine the 5 schemes that are available. 1 is always available, and then there are 19. There's 19 schemes total. 1 that's always available.
Right.
1 that appears whenever there's a duplicate on the 2 cards. So if you get 2 of the same number or 2 of the same suit, you'll get this duplication one. And then 1 scheme that's associated with every suit and every card or every value. So you'll always have exactly 5 different schemes available, and then the players secretly choose 2 from this pool of schemes. So you'll see that there's 5 on the table. You've got to figure out which of those 2 you're going to secretly use, and he has to do the same. They're worth 4 points if revealed, 3 if not revealed, although some of them work even more different. But each one of those is worth up to 4 points. So from your personal schemes, you can get up to 4 points, or up to 8 points, which is where all the asymmetry comes from.
Nice, okay. So it's basically you're going to be restricted based on what randomly gets flipped to control that you can't pick the same thing all the time, which is neat.
Right, and we really wanted to promote secret, keeping them hidden more often than revealing. So the reveal is only worth 1 extra point, so it's 3 versus 4. As well, a lot of the schemes are much easier to achieve when they're not revealed, and you can do some really clever stuff. All the schemes that use markers use a universal scheme marker, and you can drop those whether or not you're on a specific mission or not, or you have a specific scheme or not.
Oh, nice.
And so you can bluff your opponent.
I like that. That's awesome.
He'll be like, oh, well, I know, hold the line, or a line in the sand. Is he dropping those scheme markers on the center line because he's got line in the sand, or is he trying to bait me because he has distraction, or because he has trap? Where if you at the end of your turn you can reveal entrapment, and if their master was within a certain range of one of your scheme markers, you gain points. So it's this whole, is he trying to trick me? Is he not? And you're really playing your opponent. It has kind of a poker aspect to it.
I love it. Metagame. I love it. See, I love mind games are my forte. I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, we may be the first miniatures game I know of where you can actually bluff your opponent.
That's awesome. I love it. And it feels very Malifaux-y, too. I love that.
Trick into the game.
Yes. All right, so let's talk a little bit. And thanks for sharing the mission thing. That's really cool.
It's one of my favorite changes.
That sounds awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the models. Of course, last year, Malifaux, big thing at Gen Con was shifting over to some plastics, which is very exciting. Are you guys going to, in version 2, is this going to also coincide with the launch of everything being redone, or at least the core stuff being redone in plastics?
As we move forward, we'll be redoing everything in plastics.
And
it's not going to be all at one launch, so don't worry. I'm not coming for your wallet today.
Okay.
But as we go forward, we're going to relaunch things in plastic.
Is that going to be the avatars and everything, or just?
Yep.
Oh wow. Okay, so the whole line will eventually be plastic.
And new sculpts. So if you've got your old sculpt, you'll have an alternate sculpt.
Oh, cool. So it won't just be a recasting; it'll be a whole new. Oh, that's nice.
Yep. So you have new options.
Very cool. Now, one of our listeners asked if you guys were starting specifically with the Book 1 models, but I think you mentioned earlier that the initial batch will have 3 casters from every faction, even if that faction was introduced in a later book. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So so it won't just be just Book 1 casters available in the beginning. It'll be 3 from every faction, right?
Yeah, 21 in total.
Okay.
There'll be. You'll see a lot of the Book 1 masters. The guild is going to be the 3 Book 1 masters. Same with the Rezzers, etc. But especially with the 10 Thunders, you obviously need 3 10 Thunders masters, and the Outcasts have lost the Gremlins. The Gremlins now are their own faction.
Oh, cool.
So you're going to get a brand new Gremlin master. Ophelia gets promoted to master, and then the Outcasts will have 3 masters that are. And let's see, I think we're launching with the Victorias. Sorry, I was pointing my head up. My microphone might not grab it as well. The Victorias, Von Schill, and Terra.
Nice.
Cool. Now with Von Schill going up to a master, that reminded me of a question that someone asked. Is the promotion scheme, is that across the board? Like all of the guys, like all of the named guys are going up one level? Is that across the board? Or is that just some like picking and choosing some?
Well, the old Special Forces and Henchman system is basically gone. Everyone who was a henchman is now a master. Now, a lot of old characters who were masters, were just, really rare characters like the Judge or, we'll stick with the Judge. He's a good example. They're becoming henchmen. Henchmen can lead in small games. So that if you're trying to do a demo and you want to show a really simple, learn the game, that's a great way to do it. Or if you're just trying to teach yourself, or if you just want to do like a really like fast-paced tournament where there's not as much power on the table, you bring, you run it at 20, 25 soulstones, and it's a henchman-only tournament. But then at high levels, they're not allowed to lead. So at the high level, 50 soulstone tournament play, they're flat out just not allowed to lead.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Very cool.
That does sound neat, actually. So, Mac, we reached out to our listenership, if you will, and we said, Mac's going to be on the show, and what would you ask one of the designers of version 2 here at Malifaux if you could? And we got lots of questions. So,
awesome.
Craig and I are going to grab a couple. You mind answering a couple of these? These are your die-hardest fans. So that's what they tell us. So we'll see.
Absolutely, yes. I'm happy to answer.
Now, here's one I don't think you can answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So recently, a sort of a teaser was put up of a picture of a new sci-fi looking lady with a laser whip.
That is not Malifaux related.
See, that's what we wanted to know. So it's not Malifaux. It's something else.
Yeah, that's for a card game we've got coming out called Showdown.
Oh, cool. Okay.
That's not really my baby, so I don't want to talk too much about it. That's for other people to chat about. But yeah, there's Showdown is kind of a amalgamation of all of our IPs, and so you will be able to buy Malifaux decks for Showdown.
Oh, cool.
And they do function as Malifaux card decks, but it is an actual card game that you play, against an opponent where you're playing a little fun card game. It's really good for getting in between rounds during a tournament.
Well, that's fun. Well, that's cool. I love how you guys just mash everything together from all your systems too. I think that's great.
And is it going to be sci-fi based, or is it that just she looks kind of sci-fi?
That's just how that character looks. That's from one of the suit decks. That's kind of a little more generic, and it was just some awesome, cool art. I believe that one was by the illustrious Matt Bradbury.
Oh, cool. So, and you mentioned the beta was going to start the end of this month, right? End of May. Have there been any, during the initial playtest, have there been any sort of concerns that came up and sort of percolated on the internet that you think you guys have addressed and you wanted to comment on, or is everything been going pretty smoothly so far?
Well, internally everything goes smoothly, obviously, because we're always right in our heads. There's obviously hiccups during beta testing. That's why we do it.
Right.
And we've gotten a lot of really good feedback, and the game has changed and really gotten honed and sharpened quite a bit over the last few months. So I don't know exactly what specifics you're talking about. I mean, if you want to give them to me, I'll
see if I
address
can.
them. But,
Well, let's go deeper, Craig. Why don't you grab some of those good juicy questions there? What do you got?
yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to hide anything. I just
No.
don't know
I'm with you.
exactly
I'm with you.
what you're talking about. Yeah.
Let's see. No. Well, this one's neat because I know the answer because you told me at Adepticon. But this isn't deep. But I'm just going to go anyway. Will Malifaux RPG be based on 1.0 or 2.0? And how easy will it be for Through the Breach RPG created characters to transfer to the 2.0 rules?
The answer is 2.0 and extremely easy.
Oh, nice. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Could you
They have-
elaborate a little? Like you talked to me at some length at Adepticon about this, but can you elaborate on like what the use of that porting over could easily have? What use could it be?
Basically, I was building the role-playing game, and I found that all the numbers I was trying to build fell in the exact same ranges as the numbers for characters in the role-playing game, or in the miniatures game. So I didn't have to do a formula to translate them, right? I didn't have to go, okay, well, 12 defense on this guy translates into a 4 defense in game. I just didn't have to do that. The models had a 4 defense. And the only change I had to make to the role-playing game to make it fit and make it just work seamlessly was I removed evasion. I had 2 skills. One was called dodge and one was called evasion. One of them worked on melee. One of them worked at range. And I just merged them into they work against non-spells. And that allowed me to generate a single defense total. And literally your role-playing game character has all the same stats, and then they derive their attack and casting stats on their own, but you can do those math. All you have to do to convert at this time, and things can change during beta testing, but all you have to do currently to convert them is 1 yard in the role-playing game equals 1 inch in the tabletop game, and whenever I say the word character in the role-playing game, I mean model.
All right.
So you could have in your session, in your role-playing session, when it comes to a combat encounter, you could literally then play a Malifaux or use the Malifaux 2.0 rules to play out that combat encounter.
Yeah. The section in the Fate Master's Handbook that will go over that is about 2 pages. It's 1 spread. And the biggest thing I have to explain is how to manage it when players have their own Fate hand. Every player has their own hand of cards that they drew from their twist deck, and I just have to explain that that's different than the Fate deck in 2.0, and then, yards or inches. I mean, it's really smooth right now. It's kind of scary smooth, so I'm afraid to talk about it too much because I know it can't possibly be as easy as this because no one else has done it this way, and there's got to be something I'm missing.
Cool.
That's cool.
I have another question
go ahead.
from Greg in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And he sings the praises of the plastics and how cool they are, and then and talks about the Masters boxes. But he has a question with all of the dual factions that are coming up. Is there going to be any way to get some of the models from one of the master boxes? Are they ever going to be broken up so that you can get like just the just one type of model, like just I can't remember any of the names right now, but one individual model from that master box instead of having to buy the whole box
For instance, if you just want 1 nurse or 2 nurses,
right.
He wants to know if they'll be able to buy 2 nurses instead of having to buy McMorning's box.
Right.
This is one of those things where it's really difficult to serve 2 clients to do this twice. One of the things that stores are very keen on is a thing called SKU creep,
Right. Yep.
where they don't want a ton of different SKUs that they have to track.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really, really helps them out is if we don't split them apart like that. It also keeps our costs down. It means every time we retool a model, we have to retool the whole sprue, and that actually jumps up the cost considerably. we can actually charge less for the box. If we were to split, for instance, the nurses out of the box and sell just a box with the nurses, we would actually have to charge almost half of what we charge for the starter box.
Wow.
So it's not optimal, and we would like it if you could just buy those models, but we'd rather make our game as inexpensive as possible on the whole.
Right.
We think that's probably better for the game long term, and it's probably better for everyone, right? It keeps people interested, it keeps people playing, it makes the barrier for entry low. So while it does have this flaw, and we will try and address it in some interesting ways, if we can, multi-part minis, that sort of thing. The truth of the matter is that maybe one of the things that we have to accept is too expensive to do reliably.
All right. I had a couple here I think that are hinted at from earlier when I mentioned the idea of some of the early playtest comments. A couple folks have questions about how I think you sort of answered this, how it's going to work, but the new, this idea of the optional complexity, how is that going to affect competitive play? In other words, is the game going to be too simple in competitive play, or is it going to cause confusion with new players? But I think you sort of answered it with the card system. Is you think that's going to be easy enough in a competitive play environment? Just go through the cards and pick what you want for your list?
Yeah, I know it doesn't take me more than a few minutes to figure out what I'm going to bring based on the scenario, that has unfolded before me. If I'm playing, if I've announced the guild as my faction, my opponent has announced Rezzers, I know immediately that I might want to bring Lady J, but I might also want to throw in some, like Samuel Hopkins in case my opponent's bringing one of the models that have the kill it with fire rule or that sort of thing. So it creates a lot of complexity and second guessing that isn't complexity on the card. It's complexity in the options and based on your knowledge and skill. I would much rather have a game. It's the example of chess versus I actually don't have another game that I can compare it to. I would much rather my game being about second-guessing your opponent and the complexity being about that interaction between you and your opponent and the game being played, and less about does this model trump this other model that I think there's a percentage chance he's going to bring.
Right. I got it. So that makes sense to me, too. And it sounds like really the optional complexity concept is really just you have more choices in your list. When you're list building, it's just some of them are slight variations in the model as opposed to whole different models to bring. So
yeah, that's exactly it. And the example of Seamus's hat is one of the upgrades we go back to a lot. He has a hat that whenever he gets shot, he can discard the hat to either take no damage or 1 damage. I think it's no damage. He can no damage. He discards the hat and he drops a hat marker. Yeah. Anyone else can pick up the hat and get that upgrade.
No, nice. That's really fluffy. I love it.
His copycat killer, if he's in range, automatically picks it up.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So it's there's that upgrade's kind of fun and kooky, but at the same time, you're not going to sit there for 20 minutes trying to figure out if you need to bring it or not.
Right.
You're simply going to go, okay, I need Seamus to be a little tougher because I know Bodyguard is available, or I know my opponent is trying to assassinate my leader. I'm going to make sure I take this upgrade.
I'm glad you mentioned assassination because another great question here from someone who's obviously been researching some of the changes too coming up. He talks about how he's concerned that you mentioned earlier when we talked to you that Soulstone functionality has been changed and reduced in terms of for combat casters, and he's concerned that if you reduce the power of the combat caster by reducing their Soulstone capabilities, if I kill that combat caster, am I really putting the spurs to my opponent, or is he not going to feel it as much now that his caster is less effective in combat?
Oh no, he'll feel it. You lose your master, you still feel it. It's just not immediately like, oh, this game's over. It's more like losing your queen in chess, when previously it was like losing your king.
Okay. So it's still, and he says he doesn't want it to be like War Machine Hordes where if you lose your caster, you're out. But he wants your opponent to really feel the big blow of losing your master. So it sounds like
it's a pretty big hit. Yeah, well, you are not going to be happy about it. And there are missions where you're literally just going for the master or that sort of thing.
Well, I love and you mentioned earlier too, you can spend soul stones to draw 2 cards and discard one, right? So that gives your whole crew better hand management. So as soon as you lose that, that's a big blow anyway, right?
Well, you actually can do that even if the master's dead.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's actually one of the things we added to make it so that you didn't automatically feel like you were going to lose when your master dies.
Okay.
The masters are still vastly important to your strategy.
Okay. Great. We'll run a little long. Craig, any other questions you want to grab from the audience here before we...
One of the things is, and we've mentioned it a bit, is that the whole dual faction element, and a lot of the questions that we got revolved around that aspect. And the one of our listeners wanted to know, we've got for instance, McMorning is, rumor has it, becoming a Resurrectionist Guild dual master. Lucius is going Guild Neverborn, Zoraida becoming Neverborn Gremlin. Are there any other dual masters that you can kind of hint at?
Well, every faction will have, the Ten Thunders have a lot of dual faction models. They're only going to have one model who isn't dual faction. And it's not who you think.
Really?
Yeah.
So to me, that says that a certain Chinese chick is going to end up being an option for Outcast, maybe.
Yes.
Nice.
But every other faction will have will have at least one person who dual factions into another.
Gotcha.
Oh, cool.
Except for the Arcanists.
Really? And is there can you share with us? That was my follow-up actually. Is the rumor is that they're not going to have as many, if any, and why is that?
Well, it's not that they don't have any. They will have a Ten Thunders who comes in and is Ten Thunders Arcanist.
Oh, right.
But no, the Ten Thunders the Arcanists are they're shoring up they're becoming a little more unified.
Uh-huh.
The storyline's moving forward.
So it's fluff reason.
It's much harder to cause them problems in that way.
Nice. And
they're a much bigger threat to the guild now.
I don't think we clearly identified the dual faction concept. I think we kind of glossed over it earlier, but dual faction basically means that there are some models that, although they have a home faction, can actually be taken in other faction lists as well.
Correct. Basically, the process goes, when you first start an encounter, you announce a faction. Mm-hmm. And then when you get down to building your crew, you select a master of your announced faction, and that can be any of them, including the dual faction ones. Okay. Then you select models of that faction. Now, each of the dual faction models has an upgrade, or some of them, most of them do, have an upgrade that allow them to choose models from their other faction in a limited number.
Right.
But then some of them are dual faction, like Zoraida, and she just has the ability to take willpower 4 models, so she doesn't get that.
Right.
And that reminds me of another question. So would there be the potential of having a crew that included Lucius as your master? So he had some was it Lucius? Oh no, McMorning. So McMorning could be your master, so he could have some undead guys, but you could then throw death judges in there, which would make it kind of confusing. Or
here's the way that would work. For instance, let's say I declare guild. Because Death Marshals are not dual faction, so if I'm going to play with them, I have to be playing Guild.
Gotcha.
So I declare Guild.
Yeah.
I choose McMorning as my master. So we're assuming that McMorning is actually not in charge, even though he's a master. He's more like tagging along as their corner for some reason.
Right.
Maybe he's just showing initiative. He's probably there to cover his own tracks. The Death Marshals are going in to kill some undead, and he's like, crap, I better come up with an excuse why they need me because those are mine and I want to save them.
Gotcha.
So he's along for the ride, right? But he's still the master from a mechanical standpoint. He then takes an upgrade. His upgrade is called Study Group. That upgrade allows him to bring Sebastian and nurses. So he might still summon an undead during the game. But even then, he has upgrades that kind of explain that, covering track, those aren't ours, things like that. So the idea is it tells the story.
Right.
He's there covering his tracks. Sure, there's an abomination, but I didn't summon it. That sort of thing.
Right.
So to me, that says there's a lot of thought and story going into all of these choices that really kind of reassure me that this is. I feel like it's going in the right direction, but then. For me, Malifaux has been a brain burner since the beginning, and I really hope that this changes it so that I can play it more than once a month?
Well, if you recall back, the things we talked about a lot with Dust Warfare was a thing called decision fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And right now, Malifaux is extremely high on the decision fatigue. And so I'm trying to find ways to alleviate that without removing the complexity and let's not call it complexity.
The nuance.
The nuanced gameplay.
Right.
That's what the fans actually like.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want 6 pages of rules for every rule. They want nuanced gameplay where this model interacts with this other model in a very clever way, and it interacts with this other model in a different clever way. And that's what we're trying to maintain, the nuanced gameplay, the optional complexity, without making it fiddly and have all these hard set rules that you have to go to the forums to figure out how they're supposed to interact and that sort of thing.
Gotcha. I like it.
Sounds great. And I think one of the hallmarks of Malifaux has always been, and I love the example you just gave with the guild and the undead there, of the idea that the powers themselves and how they interact actually tell a little story on the battlefield while you play. And it sounds like that's coming even more, even with the optional complexity, but there's still a lot of that there. And as you bring the optional complexity in, it tells even more of a story, which is even cooler. So I think it sounds like very exciting times, and I think it's very great. I think a lot of folks out there in our game group, too, that like Malifaux, love Malifaux, but there's also groups of people who want to get more into it, but because of that decision fatigue, they kind of stay away from it. So it'd be very exciting to bring those two people together.
Yeah, I'm hoping it really works out. I'm sure it will, actually.
I can't wait, Max. So the big goal here is Gen Con, and that's when everybody can look for it. Well, of course, beta rules sooner than that. Beta rules in just a few short weeks, right?
Yeah, May 31st will be our open beta.
So if you're a Malifaux player, watch the Wyrd website for all that good stuff and get that going. And then, of course, Gen Con, bring your monies. That sounds like the Wyrd boot's going to be mobbed.
Right.
Yeah, bring money. No.
Do we know what's going to be on offer, or have any tantalizing hints about Gen Con?
Our goal is really simple: the books and as many plastic kits as we can.
A worthy goal indeed.
So it'll be like last year, where we were begging and pleading for that last truck to show up.
Right.
Yeah, and we are going to push ourselves so hard to get as many different plastic kits there as we can.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Max, so much for the extra details on Malifaux. And we'll talk to you more right after this.
Buying a new game is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get till you open it, and then it's too late. Unless you listen to the D6 generation, and then it's like poking your finger in the bottom of the chocolates, and you can only pick the ones you like.
And if the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind, the
Dice are our vice.
Oh, and now it's time to talk about our friends at, what is it, Craig?
Conquistador!
Yes, our friends at Conquistador Games. And my favorite game of theirs, the new Science, because I love science. I love scientists. I learned all about them in my various years of studying engineering. And this game lets you jump into the world of scientists and their discoveries and how they research, how they publish, in a very, very easy to understand, easy to play worker placement mechanic that really just gets the theme right out of the box. I love it.
Very excited. You were very excited to play this game.
I am.
And you were very excited to talk about it after you played it.
I was.
And you and Rodney are very excited to get us all involved in a game somehow online, or I don't know, with Rodney. It could even be video. I don't know.
We're going to try to figure something out with our friend Rodney over there and try to get a little video game conference going on of the new Science. So if you're interested in this, and again, what's great about them, theme is first. Their theme is throughout their games. They have great mechanics, easy to learn, easy to master, but well, hard to master, but easy to get your head around. So you're not thinking about the mechanics. You're thinking about how to play the game and how to actually win. Great production values. The game looks good. The new Science is great. It feels like you're looking at those old textbooks and stuff, which is in a good way. You can really capture that theme. And they don't put out a lot of titles. They work for quality. So head on over to cqgames.com for all their information and check out all their great catalog of games.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, total fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakelin and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. This week we have a really special shout out to Ellen Ruffner / Grandma. We play games with heroes, but you are ours. You battle with the Red Cross, fighting the effects of floods, tornadoes, hurricanes, fires, shootings, and bombings in places like New Orleans, New York, Kansas, Canada, Connecticut, Boston, and now Oklahoma. We love our hero. Eli, Seamus, Kira, Keegan, and Jocelyn, and Cranky too. I went to see Star Trek Into Darkness on opening weekend like a good little Trekkie. I'm not doing a review, and I'm not going to spoil anything for anyone. I did love the movie. I thought it was wonderful. I enjoyed it from start to finish. I enjoyed all the nods to classic Trek from movies and shows gone by. It was wonderful. What I wanted to talk about real quick was something that's happening on the internet, and it's in large part coming from geek girls just like myself, which makes it particularly bothersome to me. Women are pretty much freaking out about the treatment of women in the movie. There are two scenes, neither of which is spoilery, and I won't give enough detail to spoil it for anybody who hasn't seen a single thing, but one of the women is shown in her bra and panties. I know. Shocking, isn't it? Because that's just a horrific thing. And people are claiming there was no need for the scene, and it's gratuitous, and it just objectifies women, and it was a terrible thing to do. And how could people like J.J. Abrams be so callous and treat women in such a terrible manner? Okay, well, you know what? In the context of the movie, it was kind of a funny scene, and it made its own little bit of sense. And I think that the female character in the movie was messing with Captain Kirk. That's not necessarily a weak thing to me, and it didn't bother me, and I'm not freaked out every time a movie happens to show a pretty woman in her underwear. I'm not threatened by that. I don't feel that that's an affront to me, and I really don't think that any other woman should too. We see a fair amount of shirtless James T. Kirk, and I'm really not hearing the geek guys out there screaming, objectifying men. He should have his shirt on at all times. How dare you show his bicep? Yeah, so it's okay there, but it's not okay when it's women. There is also a scene where there are a bunch of high-ranking Starfleet officials gathered together, and in that scene, there are no women. Now, I haven't rewatched it. I've heard some people say there are no women, and then I heard someone say, I think there's one. Either way, the perception is there are no women or not enough women in that scene, and how dare the filmmakers make this movie and not include some women as the most senior-ranking people in Starfleet. It's terrible. It shows that they're out of touch. It shows that they don't like women. It's not a good example to set for other women. It's not a good example to set for girls. What does that tell young girls and young women except that they can't succeed because they aren't included in this group of high-ranking men? Seriously? Seriously. So one movie is going to forever crush a woman's self-confidence because she happens to notice that there aren't any women in this room full of powerful guys. If that's all it takes, you have a lot more to worry about than a Star Trek movie. And then there are people who say, yes, but it's not just Star Trek. It's this movie and that book and that TV show and that ad campaign and that product and that bit of art. Everyone has to just take a deep breath and relax about this. I wish women could just step back and say, not every time you're portrayed as being beautiful and sexy does it mean that you're being demeaned. Sometimes you're just being portrayed, as beautiful and sexy because you are. And not every time that women are not included in something is on purpose, is an attempt to somehow put you in your place. That sometimes it's just how things rolled out, and maybe it should have occurred to them to put some women in there. Maybe they just didn't. Maybe there's a reason why they did it that way. But to say that it was horrible and that somehow that this one movie, a movie about green aliens, about spaceships, and about blowing stuff up in space is going to be the be-all, end-all of women across the entire planet, that might be a bit much, and maybe everyone just needs to relax.
Oh, that sound is our friend Vic the Viking bringing the war to your door since 1999, featuring
8 or more.
Exactly, featuring the best prices on the net with fantastic service. Whatever you need is there, Craig. I mean, if it's a miniature game, they've got it. If it's miniature support stuff, hard to find primer, hard to find paints, you name it. It's there at the War Store. All the models are there. Even if let's say you just want to know what's coming up, follow them on Twitter. Follow them, head over to the War Store, check out their main website. They got all the latest news, all the pre-orders up there. You can see what the new hotness is coming up for every major game system.
It is. You can see they've got all kinds of new stuff. They've got all the new Infinity stuff. The Infinity stuff for May, which is like a big flood release. Everybody gets a little something. They got all that Mantic stuff. They've got everything you could possibly ask for. You name a miniature game, Russ. Name one.
Oh, Flames of War.
Flames of War, absolutely. Name another one.
I don't know.
It's okay. It's okay. No matter what you named.
Malifaux. Oh, wait, how about this? How about board games? How about Firefly, the board game? They're already taking pre-orders for that at the War Store too.
Firefly. How can you go wrong with Firefly, the board game?
You can't go wrong. I'll take 6. So head over to thewarstore.com. Check out all the great selection. And when you do, say hi to Neil over there. Tell him the D6G sent you, and they'll hook you up.
This is the D6 Dice Demon, and when I'm not tormenting souls in Hades, I'm listening to the D6 Generation. Shouldn't you?
The D6 Generation.
Dice are our vice.
Our friends at Game Salute always helping get the newest games to market. Great publisher, helping great game studios get their stuff out there. And if you check out what's on Kickstarter right now, Craig, have you found any cool Game Salute stuff on Kickstarter right now?
Well, I'm kind of a fan of The Princess Bride.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm kind of a fan of Inigo Montoya. And so if I just went on there and I searched out The Princess Bride, I've got this brand new game called The Princess Bride, Prepare to Die.
Yes.
It looks so funny.
I got a chance to play this briefly at PAX East, one of the demo copies, and it is a lot of fun. Basically, you're dealing with decks of cards, and they give you phrases you've got to work. You got to play cards out of your hands and make the best, funniest phrase, and a judge will decide if your phrase is funnier than the other phrases by the players in the game. So, for example, my name is Julia Childs. You did something, prepare to die. What did they do? You took my cutting board, or whatever. You can find something that's really funny that relates to Julia Childs.
That is fantastic.
Well, I'm making this stuff off the top of my head, not as good as what's coming in the game. So, take that with a grain of salt. But the great thing about Game Salute, our friends at Game Salute, also good like Geek Nation Tours. But our great thing about Game Salute is they do a great job getting all these great games out there, games that would not see the light of day. They work with great designers, great publishing studios to get that stuff out for you. And you want to head over to gamesalute.com and check out all their stuff that's coming out there, all the latest news, all the latest games they're working on, and all the other excitement.
Hello, my name is Russ Wakeland. You have made fun of my head. Prepare to die.
Yeah, I'm sure that's in there.
It is.
This is the Dice Tower Network at dicetowernetwork.com.
Welcome back. Now, we've been talking about this in achievements for a little while here. Since Gen Con, I've owned the Iron Kingdoms RPG rulebook, and I played at Gen Con.
Bag.
Yeah, and then we finally started our own little RPG local. I'm GMing it, and we've got our little campaign going. We played several sessions, and we thought it would be great to go over the mechanics and talk about the game a little bit and why we're interested in it, why we've actually played more than twice. We've already got a third session scheduled. So there you go. All right, so let's see. Well, first, let's go over the basics here. This thing was published, as I mentioned, at Gen Con last year, right? Brandy new. Now, there was originally an Iron Kingdoms role-playing game previous to this version, okay? But it was based on the D20 license. And as you probably heard in other interviews and other shows, whenever anyone from Privateer talks about it, they talk about the fact that it kind of felt like they were shoehorning the Iron Kingdom system into a rule set that didn't really, wasn't centered around the idea of warcasters and what the Iron Kingdoms was. So when they rebuilt this, it's now all new mechanics, and it's all built around the War Machines and Hordes combat system, and then with an RPG around that. So if you know War Machine and Hordes, you will know the core mechanics of this game. and you get to learn more about how the RPG part works. If you don't know that, no big deal, but it's just they've redone it to be that way.
Yeah.
And of course, the big hook here is you get to play a role-playing game in the Iron Kingdoms. So if you're a fan of War Machine and Hordes, that's great. And if you're not, it's a new fantasy universe you can check out for you, and which is great because as I talk about this, I'll talk about how it worked for our group, because in our group, you've got me, who's an admitted Privateer Press fanboy. You've got Craig, who's an admitted Privateer Press acquaintance. He's played the War Machine and Hordes, but not a huge fan, right?
Company, I just don't really like the game.
Right. And then our other two players, my brother John and our good friend Joe, they are both completely have no idea about the War Machine Hordes universe at all. They are veteran RPG players. They play Dungeons & Dragons, pretty much been playing it nonstop for many, 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 many years. So they're huge RPG experience guys, but they have no idea what the War Machine Hordes universe is like or about. So they are our everyman coming into this thing to see if the RPG stands up to those kind of people as well. So I'll talk about some of what their feedback's been so far as we talk about this too. It is a very fat hardcover rule book. It's 358 pages. It's a tome, really. Let's be honest. It is pricey. It's $59.99. But I don't know. Is that the going rate for RPG rulebooks, Matt, nowadays?
Yeah,
about that. Anywhere between $40 for a big hefty one to $60 for some of the even really really big full color monsters.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to see the book at all, Mac?
I've gotten to flip through it. I thought the art quality was really, really high. The graphic design is top notch. They're just really pushing the envelope on quality, especially when it comes to the art and the just kind of the layout. I was able to find everything I kind of wanted to know just by flipping through. So it's a really well put together book.
Oh, great. And that's what my findings were too. I don't know, Craig, you've been able to flip through it before too. What'd you think of the book?
Oh, it is right up there with any other RPG book. Quality of the paper is very high. The artwork is awesome, as you guys have already said. And it's the art direction is beautiful. I mean, the whole thing really goes together as one piece. It's very nice.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was great to look through too. And so in this big thing, we'll talk about the layout a little bit because I think it's important. We've done RPGs on the show before. We've talked about how easy or hard it is to go through the book. This has got a solid table of contents and a fantastic index. It's very easy to find all that stuff, and I've raved about how the War Machine and Hordes books are organized, and they've taken that knowledge and done it here as well in terms of how easy it is to find and look things up. The general layout is, just to give you an idea of what you're getting and how much of the areas of the book are dedicated to what. You first got a couple pages in the beginning of the book that is sort of the general, welcome to an RPG, and here's an NPC, and this is what a GM does, all that basic stuff for you, for RPG noobs, if you will. But then there's 80 pages of background material, just pure fluff. You got your history of the Iron Kingdoms, you got your life in the Iron Kingdoms, what are the people like, what are the languages like, the laws, the religion, all that stuff sort of wrapped up in 80 pages of just background material. It gives you the history, everything you need to know to kind of get your feet wet in the Iron Kingdoms. And this is kind of nice because I learned a lot here that I had only gleaned of, in smaller portions from the other books. The other books are really kind of laid out, the books from War Machine and Hordes are kind of laid out with a story, and this is sort of more factual layout. Which was sort of interesting to kind of learn that as well. So it's kind of a neat way to get another angle on life in the Iron Kingdoms, what it's like. The next 65 pages of the book are all about character creation. So the character creation in this book is huge, but it's not like it's 65 pages of rules and rolling up your character. Really, the majority of that is dedicated to different careers. And each career's got a whole page with artwork and fluff about it, and then all the mechanics behind the career all the way through. And there's 30 different careers. So of those 65 pages, 30 of them are fully dedicated to just describing each career in detail. More about how that works when we talk about character creation. Then you got 28 pages of core mechanics. So again, only a smaller chunk of the book is actually how you actually fight and do battle. So the combat system is pretty straightforward. It's very heavily based on War Machine and Hordes. You don't need to know those mechanics. They're all presented here again. But if you do know those mechanics coming in, there's a lot less to learn. It's much easier, I think, to sort of step into the mechanics. Craig, did you find that your background with War Machine and Hordes helped you understand the basics of the game?
Clearly, the mechanics of the game are based very closely to the mechanics of the mechanics of the role playing game are based very closely upon I found the mechanics of the tabletop game.
Right.
You've got slightly different stats, or I should say more stats, but you can see easily how they are derived from the stats that you normally use with the tabletop game, and the way they interact with all of your skills and everything is exactly how you would expect the things that you would do on the battlefield to extrapolate into these wider mechanics.
Yep.
skill tests and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like it was great for me because I know the miniature war game so well that there was very little. I kind of read the basics of it. I was like, oh, I get it, and I get. You could skim over like two-handed throws and all that stuff. It's right out of the book, right out of the miniature game. Now, again, a lot of dedication to the background of the game. It's what's nice about this is it doesn't assume War Machine and Hordes. So there's a whole 50 more pages of gear, armors, weapons, mechanica, which are basically advanced magic weapons that allow you to channel magic energy. That's how warcasters focus their focus, literally, through their swords or through their guns or whatever. That's all in there. All the alchemy system. There's just tons of rules about crafting and all that stuff's in there. You got 25 pages dedicated to how steam jacks work, right? You got to have that. It's War Machine, right? So there's plenty of background on the steam jacks and how they work and how they can be built into your campaign. Then you got about 13 pages of GM tips. Again, it's surprising how little amounts of the book are dedicated to mechanics, and much of them is just generated to background and material, which is, I guess, is kind of common in RPGs, but they fit a lot in these small pages for the mechanics themselves.
Keep in mind, with an RPG, background material is mechanics.
Yeah, right.
An RPG is about telling a story, and without that setting information, you really are missing mechanics.
And I think that's what I like so much about this is it really immerses you in that universe. So if you're interested in the Iron Kingdoms and always thought it was interesting, but for whatever reason the miniature war game didn't appeal to you because you maybe not a miniature game or whatever, this book's going to bring you right into that world from all angles with one purchase.
I'm curious, what's the core resolution mechanic? I mean, I want to shoot that guy over there. What do I do?
Yeah, it's actually exactly the same as War Machine and Horde. So your character's going to have a variety of stats, but they're basically going to derive down to a mat or a rat, which is the same as War Machine. So you're going to have your melee attack value and your range attack value. So that's going to be a number. The range for this value is almost, again, typical ranges you'd find in War Machine and Horde. So for an average character, his mat or rat might be a 6 or a 7, because remember, your characters are heroes, so they're a little better than the average guy. So his is a 6 or 7. Then you're going to roll 2d6. You're going to add the appropriate stat. So if you're trying to shoot a guy with your gun, you're going to use your range attack value. If you're trying to hit a guy with your sword, it's going to be your mat. If you're casting a spell, you're going to use your arcane stat, which is basically your focus number from War Machine. So your arcane might be a 3 or a 4. So you're going to take that number, you're going to add it to your die roll, and you're going to try to beat your target's defense value, exactly the same stats in War Machine, right? So your target's going to have a defense value, and you're going to try to beat that, and you're going to get them.
It's funny. I've discovered that myself, that with a miniatures game converting to a role-playing game, the numbers spread and the mechanic for resolving miniatures games give you that exact level of balance you want when characters are fighting NPCs. Yep. So there's really no reason to rebuild that math from the ground up. You've already done all that work.
It's fantastic because, and even the numbers are in the same range values too, so you could almost take a stat card from War Machine and kind of fudge it into Iron Kingdoms RPG. Like, so if there was a monster or a character or a beloved warjack or something from the miniature war game, and they for some reason haven't written up a rule for it yet officially in Iron Kingdoms, you could fudge it in pretty easily without too much trouble.
Well, and that gives the game master, I assume that's what they call him, this one.
Yes. GM,
that gives the game master who really knows his Iron Kingdoms, who really knows his War Machine miniatures game, a lot of just kind of on the fly. He can really guess where numbers should be, kind of balance it as he goes. Yep. And that gives him a lot of flexibility to really make the game his own.
Yeah, I think it's great, and it's a great way to dovetail miniature gamers into the RPG, and it's also a great way to get RPG gamers into it. And then if they sort of like the mechanics and like the miniature combat system that's in the game, maybe they'll want to try out Horde. So it's a nice combination. But it's also great because they didn't have to reinvent the wheel or balance. They know roughly that these equal pointed guys will be roughly evenly matched. So it's kind of neat. Now, last thing in the book really is there's an appendix, and you got a small bestiary in there with some basic creatures you can start throwing into your campaign. Of course, you're going to have all kinds of expansions, I'm sure, coming soon. You got your obligatory character sheets you can photocopy, your encounter sheets in the back there you can copy, as well as all the templates, and then again that great index. So a lot going on in this rule book, a lot of background material, and let's get into it. So first of all, before we talk, now the very first thing really in the book is the book starts with character creation, which I think a lot of RPGs do, and I kind of personally like that because the very first thing you're going to talk to your players about is the characters. And I love how the characters are presented in this book. The character options are presented in this book, and I'll get more of that in a second. But before we get to that, I think we should highlight the mechanics, as Mack already hinted at, because without understanding the core mechanics, when I start talking about the different character creation options, it might make a little more sense, give you more context if we talk about this a little bit. So as Mack already brought up, the basic mechanic in this game is it's a 2d6 mechanic. You add a stat value to that, and then you're going to try to beat a target number. Okay? And this is true whether it's a combat attack or whether it's a skill test to do something in the narrative portion of the campaign, like I'm going to try to spot, see if anything's hiding in the corner, or I'm going to try to, barter with the bartender, or whatever I'm going to do. It's going to be the basic same thing. Now, if it's a skill test, the book gives some nice examples of a range. So, for example, a target number of 10 to 12 would be a moderately difficult task. A 13 to 15 would be a very complex thing, and a 16 plus would be a very hard thing to attempt. So the GM's got some guidance there, and then of course there's all kinds of great examples in the book also of things you might want to try. So you're climbing a wall that's got easy handholds. Maybe it's a 11 or 12 difficulty check against your agility, or if you've got the climbing skill against your climbing. But if it's going to be if it's a slick wall, or if it's covered in grease, you can go up there with that. So that kind of thing. So that's a basic thing. Now, another core mechanic to the game, though, is feat points. Now, players of War Machine and Hordes will know that the concept of feats are in this game, and feats happen once in a miniature game, and it's a big moment. It's a big saving grace. So they've brought that into the RPG, too, in this concept of feat points. And each character is going to start with 3 feat points per session, and these are going to ebb and flow. You're going to use these a lot. You're going to get more of them, and you're going to use them in a lot of different ways. So what feat points can be spent on, for example, is you can boost any die roll that is a non-combat die roll, a non-combat skill check. And what does that mean? That basically means that boosting in War Machine and Hordes is you're adding another D6 to your skill test. So now you're trying to beat that 12 to climb that wall, but instead of rolling 2D6 plus your skill, we're now going to roll 3D6. You're adding an extra die, which is a huge boost. And it really can get rid of, it's a way to mitigate luck. And it's a great mechanic of War Machine, and it's a great mechanic to have here in the RPG as well. We had this happen with my brother John. He was trying to leap heroically onto a boat, and he leapt heroically onto the boat and totally botched the roll and was going to fall right into the water. He'd be very embarrassed. So he used his feat points in a couple different ways. You can boost it. Another option you can do is you can re-roll a failed attack skill or willpower roll. So, and you can re-roll or re-roll. As long as you have enough feat points, you can keep rolling them over and over again until you make it.
But you've only got 3.
But you only got 3. But the other big thing about these feat points is they're also used in a bunch of defensive ways. For example, you can use a feat point to pick up a parry. Now, parry in War Machine and Hordes is the same in this book. When you're in melee combat with something, if you leave it, the opponent gets an automatic free strike, which is bad. It means they get a chance to hit you and do major damage to you, unless you've got parry, which means you can walk away. So you can spend a feat point to walk out. You can spend a feat point for a free quick action, which could be a lot of different things. You can spend a feat point to shake a continuous effect. So let's say you're on fire, or you've been knocked down, or you're stationary, and you got to lose your turn or something really bad. You can spend a feat point to throw that off. You can spend a feat point to be able to charge the terrain without being slowed down. But the other big things you can spend a feat point for is to dodge a hit and make it only half damage. So let's say that bad guy rolls an incredibly good roll against you. He hits you, and he does major damage to you. It's going to just drop you. You can spend a feat point half that damage right there. So hanging on to your feat points for defensive purposes is a huge part of this game, but it's also so tempting to use those feat points for major boosts. You can also use feat points for things like Walk It Off, which basically lets you heal immediately D3 plus 1 wounds. And one thing about War Machine or the Iron Kingdoms role-playing game is you don't have a lot of hit points in this game. The core mechanics for health are the life spirals. So every character in the game is a life spiral, just like you see in the War Beasts and Hordes. And a life spiral is basically 3 spirals around physical, mental, and spirit areas, right? And there's not many points in each spiral. I think there's maybe, like on a typical character in the beginning of the game, Craig, it's like maybe 5 or 6 points per spiral.
I don't think there's that
maybe
many.
Not even that, maybe like 3 or 4.
If you're really good at something, you might have 4 or 5.
Right.
I mean, 6.
So not a lot of hit points there. And if you lose a whole spiral, just like in Hordes, your character takes a degradation in some area. So if you're for example, if your physical spiral is knocked out, then you're going to be -2 on all your sort of physical activities, physical skill tests, maybe rolling to hit, that kind of thing. So you want to make sure if you get down one of those areas, if you can just walk it off and heal D3 wounds and just pull 1 pip out of an area, you can get your strength back. So healing is huge. So you got to use these feat points very sparingly. Either am I going to go all in and be very offensive? Am I going to be defensive? And that feeling of am I all in or not is also something you see in the miniature game a lot. You got to go all in and throw your caster in there and make it all happen right now or not. Because if you throw all your feat points in, you're not hanging out in the wind. That's really a big defense. Now, you get feat points back in some pretty easy ways. First of all, if you good role playing, the GM can always throw you a feat point, which is kind of typical in these sort of hero point systems. But what I also like is anytime you roll a pair of doubles on a skill test or an attack, you also get a feat point back. So it does have sort of a caveat that people can't just be doing skill tests they don't need to do to get try to get feat points back. But what's nice about it is if you're doing a lot of fighting and a lot of skill checks that make sense, you get your feat points back. So the more you use them, the more chance you have to get them back, sort of thing, if you're really being active. Another great thing is every time you drop something in combat, you get another feat point back as well. So if you're like cutting your way through a bunch of weedy bad guys, you're getting feat points back really quickly, so you can kind of be very heroic and feel very awesome. But all of a sudden, if you're in a long, prolonged combat against one really talented sort of heroic enemy, now all of a sudden you've got to decide when to burn them because you're not getting it back so quickly, and oh no, what do you do? And that kind of thing, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Does this whole core mechanic sort of make some basic sense there?
No, it seems like a pretty smooth system. I'm a real big fan whenever you put a resource system in the hands of players.
Yeah.
I liked the action points and heroic points and D&D. I really like Edge and Karma and various versions of Shadowrun, that sort of thing. It allows players to fudge that role that they really, really care about, but because it's a resource, they don't feel like they're just cheating.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that also mirrors the War Machine experience, right? Because you've got a big part of War Machine and Hordes is your focus or your fury. And again, you've got the same sort of management, decision to make in the game as well.
Yeah, that mechanic has that kind of same theme to it.
Right. All right, so let's talk about character creation. And I was really interested about this because, Craig will talk about this. The last few role-playing games we reviewed on the show were all based in systems that Craig and I knew really well going into it. For example, Dark Millennium, all the Death Watch stuff. All those games, we know those systems really well. So we came into that role-playing game, we were looking at it from the point of view of, hey, here's a game we know and love really well. I want to role-play in that universe. How do they adapt the role-playing experience? How do they capture the essence of that game? Now, coming into Iron Kingdoms, I was also from that point of view, where I was like, oh, I love War Machine and Hordes. I want to see how it plays as an RPG. But I was really curious to see how my brother and our friend Joe were going to react to it, because they have no knowledge of this game system, the universe, anything about it, but they have a lot of fantasy RPG experience. Was it going to draw them in? Was the character system going to draw them in and really hook them on the game concept and the universe really quickly? Or was it going to be very cumbersome and clunky and like, oh, I don't know how to, what do I pick? What do I do? Right? So let's talk about it. They have I think it's sort of a unique character building system. I think some RPG people are going to feel it's very restrictive, but I think other folks are going to like how easy it is to enter. So let's talk about the stats real quick. I don't spend a lot of time on these, but there's basically some primary stats areas. You got your physique, your agility, and your intellect. And these break down, these are sort of main stats, and below them are two substats for each area. So in physique, there's two substats called speed and strength. Agility, there's poise and prowess. And then intellect, there's arcane and perception. And all these stats break down. Their point values are usually between 3 to 4, 5 is really, really high. So they're down in that low point value area. And again, these are going to be the core. They're going to add to your 2d6 roll when you're doing things, or they're going to be used to derive stats that you might be used to seeing in War Machine and Hordes. For example, your defense, which is a target number somebody needs to hit you whenever they're making any kind of attack, whether it's ranged or melee against you. That's sort of how good you are at dodging. Go ahead, Craig.
I'm just saying that's it's not like there's ones that you can be like, well, so I don't really need that particular stat. They're all things that you want to be good at.
Right. So you got your defense, you got your initiative, which of course is important because like many RPGs, this is a game where you're going to roll an initiative at the beginning of combat, and it's going to set up the initiative order for everybody, and you're just going to act in that order. So initiative is obviously huge. You're going to get an armor stat, which is mostly going to become from what you're wearing, but that's going to be what you deal block and damage with. You're going to have a willpower stat, and of course your mat and your rat, your melee attack value and your range attack value, which is all about what you get to add to your die to try to hit your opponent. So that is those things. Now, one other note about this game before we get into character creation is when you're looking at these sheets, these career choices, you're going to see these columns for hero, veteran, and epic. So in Iron Kingdoms RPG, there's basically 3 campaign stages. There's a heroic stage, and everybody's sort of at the beginning of their hero's life cycle when you're brand new to the world. You're still a hero, but you're a new hero. Then there's veterans who are sort of advanced heroes. They've got a lot of XP under their belt, and they're really kicking butt. And then there's epic when you're sort of at the top of your game. You're getting near the sort of the level cap, if you will, of the game system, and you're just really rocking the world. So you're going to see that when you're looking at career choices and racial choices, you're going to have limits on your stats at these different stages in the game. So where you're still just a hero, there's a limit on how good of a hero you can become in each area, and it sort of forces you as you advance in the system to spread out your stats. So you can't just jack your strength all the way through the roof. Your strength's going to hit a limit at the heroic level, and you have to jack other stats until you become a veteran, then maybe you can bring your strength another point or two. And that's, I think, because there's not a lot of point ranges in this game. There's only, to go from a 5 to a 6 is a big jump in this system, so there's not a lot of room to advance, there's not a lot of granularity, if you will. So the first thing you're going to do is pick your race. Now, when you're looking in the rule book, the races have a nice full-color page dedicated to each race. Each race is going to have some art, it's going to have some fluff, and of course, going to have details about the race. And the races offered in the core rulebook are humans, dwarves, gobbers, which are your goblins, Iosians, who are basically your they're not really high elves, but they're your I hesitate to use the word good in the Iron Kingdoms, but they're your goodish elf race. You got your Nis, who are your darker elf race, if you will. You got your Ogren, who are your ogres. So you can play an Ogren out of that, which is kind of cool. And you got your Trollkin in the core rulebook too, which your Trollkin are like a cross between trolls and humanoids. They're smaller trolls, so those are your troll people. When you pick your race, that's going to dictate your starting value for those 9 stats I just mentioned. So unlike a game like Dungeons and Dragons where you're going to roll up or work on each individual stat, picking your race is going to dictate your stats right out of the box. Now, you're going to have some points at the end of character creation to sort of try to tweak and give yourself a kind of pip up and down here and there in your stats. But basically, your core stats are going to be based on your race. The other thing to watch for your race for is the maximum values each of those stats are going to hit is going to be dictated by your race as well. So it's going to be really difficult for a human character to ever be as strong as an Ogren, let's say, which is probably as it should be. But so it's going to give you your limits. If you want to really pay a really, really strong guy, Ogren's your choice, but he's not going to have the intellect range, maybe, of an Iosian, for example. Also, each race is going to determine the languages you kind of know at start. Also, what kind of archetypes are available. So, for example, some races don't know magic at all or well, so you can't really be a magic user of certain races, whereas other races are better at other things. And there's going to be some bonus abilities. So humans get bonus stats, Trollkins get the tough ability, which makes them really hard to kill, that kind of thing. So each race, as you might expect, has all kinds of little racial abilities as well. But the big thing is, what are your starting stats? And that helps guide you into your career choice as well. Any questions about race choices? No?
Not really.
The way it worked where you got the stats were dictated by your race. So it's not like you roll up a crappy character and you either feel like you're cheating because you have to start over or you just deal with a crappy character. And I know there are lots of people out there, and when it always comes up when we talk about role-playing games, that enjoy playing those crappy characters, but that's not me.
And one of the nice things about having the race determine your stats is it really sets what this race is good at. And that's a nice way in a fantasy realm to kind of theme an entire group of people towards one thing. For instance, your high elves, for lack of a better term, are probably better at magic because their stats are a little leaning towards that. And it allows you to kind of enforce that, but not really force it, right? You can still play a dwarven cleric, for lack of a better. Well, that's really good in D&D, so it's hard to describe, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, and you have some points to play with at the end of your character creation, so you can make a human who's almost as strong as an Ogren at the start, but he's going to be very focused in strength. Whereas, you can spread them out a little bit. If you're playing an Ogren, you could be a little broader. So, but it definitely, I like that too, and I think it's also less intimidating to start, right? Because a guy getting into this game, it was great for our 2 new players, the Iron Kingdoms, because they immediately identified with those races and they kind of knew where they were coming from, and a quick read gave them the information, and they said, okay, I want to be this or that. And kind of get immediate gut check for where that was.
Yep.
All right. The next thing up is you got to choose your archetype. So your archetype is sort of the core, sort of, I guess, lack of a better term, the genetic gift or the skill your guy was born with. So you're a dwarf or a human or a gobber or an Iosian, but what's your knack? What are you really, really good at? Before we get to your careers, what are you just good at? So there's 4 different things you could choose from. There's gifted. Gifted basically means you can cast magic. So you're in the ways of magic. And remember, your race does dictate which of these archetypes you can choose. So each race section says, this guy can be gifted or an intellectual or mighty. Maybe not skilled or whatever. So some of the races cannot be gifted. If you choose gifted, you've got 2 choices. You can be a will weaver or a focuser. If you're a focuser, you're basically a warcaster from the War Machine universe. You can channel your focus through items. You can take control of warjacks with your mind. You use magic in a very certain way. If you're a will weaver, you're a more traditional magic user. That is, you've got you cast magical, you sort of use your body's energy to cast magic, and when you do that, it weakens you, and then you sort of recharge it and go back again. The core mechanics of how magic is cast is the same. It's just the resource you use is slightly different. So a focuser will actually get focus, just like in War Machine, and be able to spend focus to do things, whereas a will weaver actually just sort of spends physical energy, if that makes sense, and casts spells in a slightly different way. But they can have access to the same spells, and in fact, they overlap in some cases. So a will weaver can cast Arcane Bolt, and so can a focuser, but they cast it from different sources, if that makes sense. Also, each archetype you choose lets you pick a benefit. So in the case of a Will Weaver, for example, you can become a combat caster, which gives you better casting. Craig, do you remember some of the benefits, the gifts we talked about with that?
With the caster?
Yeah.
Well, I kept bouncing back from fast caster to combat caster because I didn't. Each one of them is going to. There's the with the warding circle that makes it easier, makes you more defensible, and each one of them is going to sort of. They're not going to dictate to you what you have to do, but they're going to predispose you towards a specific sort of tactical mindset, so to speak. So, are you going to hang back and fire lots of your spells, or you want to charge in and fight in hand to hand with your magically enhanced weaponry? Or so there's a lot of things, and every one of them is good depending on kind of what you're envisioning your character to be like. And each one of the archetypes sort of had that a range of that thing to work with you.
Exactly right, and they're just the ability you can pick. And some of them are like extra spells almost, like the warding circle. It sets up a little warning area around your camp, so if someone comes in, it's gonna alert you to things like fast caster or combat caster, which give you bonus dice when you attack and stuff with spells. Then you've got the intellectual area, which is basically the smarty pants character. Our friend Joe is playing an intellectual, so his big thing is he's +1 to attack and damage rolls to him, and not only that, but all of his friends nearby. So basically, he's so smart, he's like dictating battle commands, and as long as you're staying near him, he's going to tell you the best way to hit and get behind him, that kind of thing, and that's how it manifests in the game. And again, there's different sort of sub-bonuses you can pick. One, from the intellectual, you can hyper-perception, which basically means your perception rolls are boosted, which is kind of like your spot checks in D&D. You can have photographic memory, genius. There's all kinds of choices here. The other archetype is mighty, which is basically you're physically strong, so you're better at the combat skills. You got all kinds of boosts in that way. And then there's skilled, which is better at like the non-combat things. You can pick extra skills and learning. So there's different areas you can make your character to kind of be focused in those things. Pardon the pun. So that's the archetype. And the next up is probably the most fun and maybe the most innovative part of the game, which is how you choose your starting careers. So the majority of the character creation section is dedicated to these careers. And each career has its own page. And a career is like anything from an aristocrat, who's just a rich, well-connected individual who's got a famous family and lots of money, to a gun mage, to a pistolier, to a duelist, to a warcaster, to a trencher from Signar, to a widowmaker, a sniper from Khador. All these careers. But what's interesting about it is you don't pick one, you pick two.
Right.
What'd you think about picking two, Craig?
I enjoyed it a lot because what each career gives you is actually a set of skills and some money and some equipment. So basically what you're doing is you're combining two facets of a war game table character, putting them together to make them more of a unique, interesting character that you're going to be playing. So you can actually, like, I chose a warcaster duelist. So I have a lot of cool skills that you get from duelist, and then I have a lot of cool skills that I get from a warcaster. And unfortunately, like in most fantasy milieus, you get this issue where if you go with a sort of a fighter magic user combo, your original stats are not geared specifically one way or the other, but you can still bounce it out. And with Russ's help, we made that work better than the initial session led us to believe it might. But it's very interesting because what you're doing, again, it's giving you little boosts, it's giving you skills, it's also giving you access to other skills to choose from. So this is where you basically finish rounding off your character for the most part, other than spending the last few points to boost one thing here or there. And it's giving you these skills that specifically go with the careers that you're choosing. So it further shapes your character, both stat and mechanics wise, but also from sort of a fluff and theme perspective.
It's also always nice to have a system that rewards a character for being broad rather than hyper focusing on one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what's interesting about it is exactly what you're right, Max. So for example, you can sort of make it a single class. Like my brothers chose gun mage, pistolier, right? Well, a gun mage is good with pistols, and a pistolier is good with pistols even a different way. So he's sort of made himself a super awesome pistol guy, and he's a super awesome pistol guy. But then our friend Joe, he chose aristocrat rifleman. So he's good with a rifle, but he's also this rich dude who ended up, and it's almost like the stories write themselves as you read these. Like, here's one investigator. So I could make a gun mage investigator or a highwayman investigator. Or how about, who is pirate? I could be a pirate priest. What the heck's a pirate priest? But I could make one and try to role play it. Or how about a priest ranger or a soldier thief? So it's almost like you just get ideas popping in your head for the character to play as you flip through these pages. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and it works really well because a lot of the storytelling just happens by you trying to rationalize that juxtaposition.
Exactly right. So it's a lot of fun, and as Craig mentioned, all of a sudden you get all the starting assets for both sides. So by being a rifleman aristocrat, Joe's character has lots and lots of money, and he's really good with a gun. So he has the money to buy. So he's starting off with some really nice equipment.
Social skills.
And social skills, right. And the thing that's interesting is if you choose investigator, for example, it doesn't give you a lot of combat skills, but now you've got a guy who's really good at tracking and figuring out a lot of non-combat activities. So you can decide, do I want to have a guy who's good at narrative and combat parts of the game? Am I mostly a combat guy, or how am I going to work that out? So it's really, really fascinating. And it almost, those 30 different careers, combining them in all the different ways makes a lot of class choices that really is a lot from one starting book in an RPG.
Yeah.
Well, there's a reason it's 358 pages or something like that.
Right, exactly. So, and that's, I think, a lot of fun. So once you get that built out, the last thing you're going to do is just increase your stats. And you're going to have a few points to spend to pop some stats up and down where you want. And then do some last polishing in your character, and you're pretty much ready to rock. Pick your starting gear, that kind of thing. But again, what's nice is it's not a lot of overwhelming choices, because once you pick your 2 classes, that lists your starting gear and all your other stuff. So if you got any money, which most of the classes don't give you a lot of money, it's really just starting gear. Like you have your pistols you start with and all that stuff. So you're pretty much ready to go. So you can kind of say, I want to be a pirate priest, and you figure out what you get, and you're ready to rock that crazy character.
I found that games that have you buy less of your stuff at the beginning are usually much easier to get into, especially that first night when you're all trying to share one book.
Yeah,
exactly.
And what I think was the best part about the system and all the great artwork and all the great theme for each career, that sucked my brother and Joe right into the game. And they were sold, or like, wait, this is a fantasy game with guns? Wait, this gun shoots magic bullets? What? And he gets to wear a tricorner hat? Oh, I'm in. It's like that whole, you just got sucked right in.
I'm sold on the entire world based purely on the tricorn hat myself.
I know. That was the first model I ever bought was my Arcane Gun Mages. That sucked me into Signar right off the bat.
That was the first one I bought.
Oh, they're so. Have you got the new mounted ones? They're on horses now, dude.
I haven't unfortunately been able to keep up with War Machine.
Yeah.
I love the models and I like the game. I understand it. I played it a little bit, but it's not. I don't have a group I get to play with very often. So unfortunately my Captain Shea and his guys are sitting on a shelf along with some of my Signar.
Well, that Captain Shea would make a great pirate swordsman. Just saying.
I don't disagree. He's a cool model.
He is. So let's talk a little bit about the combat system here real quick. So that's basically how you create your character and you're ready to rock. So we've already talked about the basic mechanics. I'll just go through the combat system real quick here. It's not very complicated. If you know War Machine and Hordes, great. You already know this pretty much. There's a few differences I'll mention here. But if you don't, I'll go through it anyway so everybody gets the basic feel. So you're in your narrative mode. All of a sudden, you're getting jumped by a bunch of Ogren. Or, well, a bunch would be hard. 2 Ogren. What are you going to do? Let's get into initiative order. So we're just going to roll initiative, which is basically your initiative stat, which is derived plus 2d6. Take that number. You're going to set up an initiative sequence, just like you do in many other role-playing games. We use a whiteboard for this to keep track of our people. The new DM screens that are out for Iron Kingdoms RPG come with some dry erase cards that you can be used to order your characters, whatever you want to do, but just keep track of your order. Next thing's going to happen is you're basically going to go into the phase. So it's going to become, there's a maintenance phase and a control phase, and then your stuff starts happening. So maintenance and control are almost the exact same thing as in War Machine and Hordes. Basically, maintenance phase is just clean up continuous effects, that kind of stuff, very simple. Some things will say happens in the maintenance phase, just do it then. The control phase, only really important if you got warjacks or spellcasters on the board. Usually the upkeep spells got to be kept up. There are spells in the game that, if you keep putting energy into them, they stay up, they stay in effect. So, for example, a shield spell or something like that. There are also focus gets recharged here. There are tests to make for will weavers that have to kind of see if they're going to pass out because they spend too much energy. That all happens here. Next up is the meat of the game. The meat of the combat is the activation phase. So in the activation phase, you can either move your guy and then act, or act then move. It's a little different than the miniature war game. In War Machine, you move first then act. But here you can either act then move or move then act. The only thing you can't do is interrupt your movement with an action. So when you move, it's pretty straightforward. Your guys all have a speed stat, and that's how many inches you move on the board. So this is based on a miniature game, and kind of like D&D 4th edition, the rules are designed to have miniatures on the table or some kind of representation on the table to keep track of where everything is. So it's definitely meant to be played in inches, having something on the table. There is a downloadable PDF on their site for you can print all kinds of paper versions of everything if you want to play with paper. But of course, if you have models lying around, that's obviously the intended way to play. So you're going to move a number of inches for your guy. You have different movement options. If you just walk, you can then, of course, use your movement speed and then attack. If you run, you're not going to do anything else, but you can double your speed. And if you charge, just like War Machine and Hordes, you can pick a target, run at them, and you move your speed plus 3 inches. Okay. Then once you're done with your movement, or before your movement, you can act. You can either take 2 quick actions, or you can attack and take 1 quick action, or you can do something that requires a full action to make that in your entire action. Most of the time, they're going to be attacking in a quick action. A quick action is something like drawing your weapon, reloading a gun, pulling the pin on a grenade. Casting a spell is a quick action. Most spells are quick actions, which basically means if you're a spell slinger, you can do 2 quick actions instead of a regular attack. You can cast 2 spells in a turn, no problem. And don't forget, you can also spend feat points for an additional quick action. And if you're a quick caster, you get a free quick action to cast a spell. Spell slingers can sling a lot of magic in one turn if they've got the focus or the will to do it. So they can get very, very nasty very quickly.
Well, and that goes along quite well with the miniatures game.
Exactly right. Exactly. There doesn't seem to be the spell limit is based on your focus, not on. There's not usually a once per turn spell limit. You can do other things too, like you can quick action can be used to drive a steam jack. That means if you're a jack marshal, you can quick action to yell charge, and your war jack was charging in. It does not take an action for a warcaster to make a jack move, of course, because he's in his head controlling him all the time. You can use skill or abilities acquire that, go prone, all kinds of stuff. So basically, quick actions are basically little quick stuff. They are tricky to manage, though, because my brother's gun mage, his guns are all single shot and they need to reload. And he's got all these abilities where he's like, in one turn, he's like shooting one pistol, holstering it, drawing a second pistol, shooting that, then reloading it. He's got all these little things. He's got a fancy bandolier and click, click, click. And he's working on, he's having a blast managing all that and keeping track of exactly how many times he can fire his gun in one turn. It's kind of fun to watch. And that's basically it. Shooting, the actual action of actually attacking, we've already talked about. You're going to roll 2d6, add the appropriate stat, which is usually your mat or your rat. And weapons, how your mat is calculated is basically weapons are going to add a bonus value to your poise, which is your range attack value, or your melee attack value if it's a sword. And you're going to roll to hit, and you roll 2d6, add your mat to it. If you beat your target's defense, you hit them, and then you're going to roll damage. Damage is, again, 2d6 plus the POW of the weapon. So weapons all have a power, and you're going to add that number to 2d6, and you're trying to beat your opponent's armor value. And every point above his armor value you do is going to be a point of damage you do your opponent. Big things to remember about this game is you can boost those values, not with feat points to attack, but there are things you can do to boost values. For example, the gun mages have magic bullets that boost their hit and damage rolls. Craig's Warcaster, when Warcasters cast spells, they can boost it. If you've got a weapon that is Mechanica that can be focused through, like Craig's character has a rapier that has been built in so he can channel his focus through it. He can basically use his focus points to boost his hit rolls and his damage rolls, which make that really deadly. He can also use focus points to attack more than once in a turn with his rapier, just like a War Machine. So the spellcasters, what's interesting is, once you get the hang of it, that magic user fighter can be a nasty magic user fighter, especially for a focuser, because he's got all that focus that doesn't require him to use feat points to actually burn boosted hit rolls and extra swings. And the big thing is when you do damage to stuff, you're going to take points off their life spiral. And just like War Machine and Hordes, you're going to roll a d6, indicate which spiral they get hit in, and start coloring in the little circles you take damage on. And don't forget, you can take a feat point to reduce that damage to half if you need to. And just like in D&D 4th edition, there are 2 kinds of NPCs to deal with. There are your sort of heroic NPCs, which are going to have life spirals and all the stats of characters, and sometimes even a feat point to spend. But there are also going to be your lower level minions who are just going to have a certain number of hit points, but not any spirals to worry about. So you might have a goblin they're fighting, or some feral orcs or something, or some pharaoh they're fighting, which are little pigmen, and maybe they've got 5 hit points per guy. You don't have to worry about any life spirals. As soon as they take 5 points, they go down. So that's pretty much the combat system in a nutshell. Does that make sense?
No, I'm completely confused.
You got it, Mac, or you were really confused?
Can you do that? Can you say that again? I missed it.
The whole thing, or just the beginning part?
No, I was just kidding.
All right. Craig, what do you think of the combat system now that you've played it a few times?
Well, I mean, it's War Machine, so it's very easy to kind of roll back into. It's very cinematic in that you're trying to hit them, and then you're trying to break through armor. So there's not a lot of abstraction in the actual order of operations, so to speak. I am still constantly forgetting that I can only boost using my one weapon.
Right.
But that's and it's not like you could. It's not like it's easy to choose something else because it costs a fortune to get something else you can boost through.
Right.
And you can only boost through a weapon that you've treated special, that you've spent all this time and effort and money on, or armor that you've done the same. So you're not going to be able to. You're not nearly as endurable as a warcaster in the game.
Right.
In the tabletop game. But yeah. Other than that one thing, I am. It's very easy to transition from the tabletop to the role playing game, and I like that. I find it intuitive once you've learned these basic rules. It's really fast and dirty, and once you get into a combat encounter part of your adventure night, it goes very quickly.
Yeah, I don't think the combat feels tactical, but not overly heavy. And I don't know. I feel like it's less intimidating than D&D 4th edition for some reason. But maybe because I know War Machine Hordes really, really well too. I think there's enough there to be very tactical, but it's not as. I don't think it's quite as complex as some of the D&D 4 stuff that's out there. But
it requires you to manage your character more.
Yeah.
And the storyline and the events that are happening, and less about the actual tactical experience.
I think it's probably true, and I think there's also. It feels like there's a lot of choices. I think there's a lot for each character, even a combat, even a fighter, because he gets to choose, instead of choosing through a bunch of cards, which is not a bad mechanic in DD4, which you get to pick, am I going to do this kind of attack or that kind of attack? It's more, how am I going to, what weapon am I going to use, and how am I going to best use it to my advantage, and which spells am I going to add in to boost it? If I'm a gun mage, or if I'm a rifleman, am I going to use this rifle or that rifle? Am I going to try to aim for bonus damage? Am I going to move so I don't get hit as well? Am I going to use a feat point here to really make sure I hit him, but then I won't be able to defend myself as well? That kind of thing. Those are the kind of decisions you're making.
I have a question.
Yeah.
With the, you described ways to get multiple actions upon actions upon actions and all those things. Have you found that the turns slow down, or is the resolution itself so quick that, one player having 3 or 4 actions doesn't slow things down comparatively?
I think the decision-making process, there's a little bit of analysis paralysis when you're a new player to kind of think of all your choices. But once they decide what they're going to do, resolution is extremely quick. Okay. It's really 2d6, and all your stats, the character sheets are pretty well designed too. So you just look at a number, roll 2d6, see if you beat it. It really comes down. And then the big thing is you roll, you miss, and now you're trying to decide, do I burn the feat point for the reroll, or do I need and risk missing again if I don't kill him, or do I save the feat point for defense, because the guy, if I don't kill him, he's certainly going to mess me up, right? So that's another little pause where people pause. But I think those are fun decisions to watch the players agonize over, right? Those are the fun ones where you're like,
especially early on when you're learning the system, that's really important part of the learning process, and it's okay if especially early on things take longer. I was just kind of curious if by session 4 or 5, if things are still taking a long time, then it's either your group is just slow players, and that's perfectly fine. Or maybe the system has a little hang up with your group, right? I hesitate to blame the system for anything, because heaven forbid that would mean I'm at fault for stuff.
Right. Well, we found already, I think, Craig, battles. We've had pretty complicated battles go really quickly already, even in the second session.
Well, the second session had an extremely complicated battle, and it went very quickly.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, as long as you're still, you're not getting knocked out of that theater of the mind. You're still in the moment, and you're trying to think of what's going on in your heads and that sort of thing. I think the system's probably working great.
Yeah, it was less to do. There were less moments of like, oh, how do I do that again, and more, dear God, what do I have in my arsenal to stop that thing? Right, was happening. Which is always
how am I going to spend these points to save my ass and that sort of thing.
Right, which is always fun to see.
It creates a lot of nice dramatic tension.
It does.
And it created some cool stuff, because there are some cool abilities too. Like, for example, the gun mage. Craig has one too that just sort of does this too. But the gun mage has a spell that when he casts on his bullet, it blasts your opponent back D3 inches. And they had this situation where there's this Ogren attacking them, and he's on a boat, and I'm not sure we can kill him instantly, but if I could just blast him back 3 inches and knock him off the boat, that would buy us some time. So there's like there's sort of external to the object of just trying to kill him, there's all kinds of other little tactical options too, much like in War Machine. Or can I knock him down? Because again, if you've knocked him down, he's going to lose an action, and that's huge. Can I stall him for a turn? There was one battle with Pharaoh where I think, Craig, it was you that kept knocking the guy down.
Yeah.
So he couldn't get up. So he kept trying to, and every time he'd get up to charge, Craig would knock him down again. He wasn't killing him. He couldn't quite kill him, but he just kept knocking this leader down, and the leader was just growling at him and just so upset. It was really funny to watch.
Are you running a pre-made adventure? Do they have those out yet, or are Are you just kind of running something of your own design?
So it's my own design, but I've been pulling little elements from some of the pre-made stuff. So they have a sample adventure online, and then they have the first issue of one of the issues of No Quarter came out right after, had some stuff in it, and then the Urban Adventures supplement book that came out recently also had some stuff in it. And I've been not taking it whole cloth, but like, oh, that's a neat idea, grabbing that and putting it in, that kind of thing. So it's a bit of both. But I've been using that trying to get, because it's my first campaign too, so I'm trying to get like a balanced idea of like what's a super scary scenario for people at this level kind of thing, But yeah, we've been having a lot of fun time with it. And one thing Craig mentioned, which I think is
just throw them up against a colossal. I'm sure they'll do fine.
Right. Yeah, exactly. If anybody ever complains that the characters have it too easy, there's many things in War Machine you can bring out that would just kill something instantly, pretty much. But
there's this Kador coach that comes along.
Right.
Oh, crap.
Right. Well, one thing that Craig mentioned was, your character feels weaker than a warcaster because he doesn't have the armor, he doesn't have the sword. And I think one thing that's interesting about this game is there's a strong XP system. As you gain experience points, you're going to get 2 to 3, maybe a session, 1, 2, or 3 a session, probably. And 10 XP is a lot, 50 is a lot. That moves you from 50 moves you from heroic to veteran, and then another 50 moves you from veteran to the epic level, I think it is. But the big thing to remember is there's a chart in the book, and when you advance in XP, when you get to a certain point in the chart, it's going to say, okay, now, and it's not based on class or anything, it's just now that you've gotten to 4 XP, you may increase one of the skills that your careers allow you to increase by 1 point, right, for example, or you may now increase one of your abilities by 1, that kind of thing. Because there's not a lot of advancing going on, and also your hit points are never going to go up. This is not D&D. It's not like at level 1 you got 15 hit points, and at level 2 you've got 25 hit points, and at level 10 you're rocking 85 hit points as a fighter, and you can walk into a bar room and be like, I've got 85 hit points. There is nobody in this bar that can draw a bow and drop me in one shot. You might do triple damage, but that's okay. I can take it. This campaign's not like that. You're not going to get a lot more hit points. Your life spirals aren't going to jump up from, there's only so many circles you can ever have. And your abilities aren't going to change enough to really ever give you a lot more spirals. What's going to save you? Oh, go ahead, Mac.
So like over the course of a campaign, you might go from 4 in your life spiral to 6.
Right, exactly. So what's going to save you?
I like that a lot.
What's going to save you is that awesome suit of Warcaster army that took you, 3 adventures and 80 sessions to get. Now he's finally got his Warcaster armor, which now lets him put his focus into block damage, and he's got that, and you got the equipment going on, and you've got some skills that let you maybe dodge better and stuff. But you're always, and this is something both our D&D players have mentioned several times, and I think Craig mentioned this too, it feels so scary you can die in one shot. And so it feels like, you feel like a god, because the heroes are walking out there, and our rifleman's like dropping 3 guys a turn, and our gun mage is dropping a bunch, and Craig's like frying a dude and running a guy through with a rapier, leaping across a hill, and it's like going great. But if they ever fumble and don't get that guy, or if the bad guy swings first, God forbid, and they don't dodge, or they didn't keep their feat points to reduce it, all of a sudden they've taken a hit, and only one guy's gone down so far in our 2 sessions, but they've come close a couple times.
Yeah, well, it all comes down to not having that feat point in there.
Exactly. So the players are, and we're all learning together, that feat points are just as important defensively. And so it's really, you really are feeling the burn. Do I spend that feat point now, or do I save it? And when do I use it? So and I like that because it feels like, I've been reading a lot of these Joe Abercrombie books, and one of the things they talk about all the time, all these super good fighters are always like, a fight often comes down to who hits first. And so these awesome fighters all come down to like, when do I make my move to hit the guy before he hits me? And it manifests itself so far with our 2 D&D players are both like, Joe, who's usually not a cutthroat character, is totally cutthroat in this campaign. He's like, as soon as he senses someone's going to attack him, he's like, I kill the guy. He's just like in him because he realizes if they strike first. So it's going to be interesting as it progresses and there's more morally ambiguous situations, how fast they are on their triggers. I'm really curious how that plays out because they're really incented to strike first, which is much like real life.
I predict your group is going to end up burning down several orphanages before they learn that lesson.
I think it might happen.
We did leave some poor apothecary to die on the flagstone.
There were 2 cases.
Oh, I'm sure you had it coming.
They also shot a guy in cold blood once because they didn't want to deal with him in the middle of combat. Joe did that. So it's like
left the guy to die too.
Yes, and left the guy die. Yeah, there may or may not be ramifications.
It sounds like medieval Shadowrun to me.
It's good fun. It's good fun. So one other thing first to mention before we start wrapping up here is for GM support, right? So if you're a GM, one of the most challenging things a GM has, especially jumping into a new campaign, is how the heck do I create a relatively balanced encounter for my players? And it's hard. It's hard no matter what system you come up with because It's all going to depend on the skill of your players in terms of understanding the mechanics and how well they play it, and the tactical level of your players and how tactical they want to be. You know, they just want to be laissez-faire. Do they want to be forced to be very tactical in the game? What's nice about this system is they have an encounter point system, and every creature in the bestiary, and a lot of the example encounters that are given all have an encounter value, and they tell you too, roughly based on the combined experience level of your characters, here's the number of encounter points you probably want to set an encounter to be roughly equal. And so what I did was, for our first day, I didn't want anybody to just die, so I dropped the encounter points by 25% of what they recommended. So I figured no one's going to complain if they kick butt, right? So we'll try that first, and they pretty much wiped the floor of their opponents. So the next time I put them up to like more equal level, and it was close. It was a couple battles of real nail biters, but they were victorious. And so I think so far for me, the encounter point system seems to be a pretty good rule of thumb for getting a roughly balanced equation. So I really like that. It really gets me see without knowing the creatures well. I can sort of look at it and go, well, I know they can handle a pharaoh, and a pharaoh's got a roughly counterpoints of 3 per guy. Oh my God, this dragon's in counterpoint level of 10 by himself. Well, that's pretty serious business, right? So you kind of, as a GM, you can kind of quickly gut check, am I going to overpower my guys by including 2 of these things in this one encounter?
Right. And an interesting thing that I overheard at Adepticon, where I heard people complaining about the system and saying that it was too easy, and it was the players didn't feel like they were in danger. And I would say that's on the GM, first of all.
Right.
With so few hit points, like what are you literally
How
going?
do you not feel in danger?
Right.
Eggs in the woods? Is that what you're doing? Because
right.
Like yeah. I was like, I was taken out by a freaking zombie.
You was.
I mean, yeah, sure. I went toe to toe with an ogren for a couple turns first.
Yeah, the ogre softened you up.
One of the things about miniature or about role playing games that a lot of people forget is if a player character rolls high, an NPC dies, and you're going to see hundreds, if not thousands, of NPCs over the course of a campaign. Mm-hmm. If you one-shot a gremlin or a goblin or a little lizard man, no one cares. Right. However, when that gremlin rolls a 20 and one-shots the cleric, right. It matters a lot more. And the NPCs are rolling, when you just look, zoom out to that macro, NPCs over the course of a campaign are rolling a lot more dice. They're a lot more likely to just one-shot a player.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's what happened. And that's what I like about the feat point system being defensive, because that kind of happened to Craig. An ogre hit him and did a really good hit, and Craig spent his feat point to reduce it, which was the smart thing to do. And then I think prior to that, you spent all your feat points trying to get this ogre. Yes. And you almost got him, but you didn't quite get him. So you ran around this post to avoid the ogre and right into a ghoul who got a lucky hit on you, and you had no feat points left, and you went down. Right? A zombie. So it was very much that kind of a situation where they were just sort of one-on-one. They could have handled either one, but because of the complexity, it was a situation. Fortunately, the rest of the party took them down, and it was a big deal. But that's the kind of thing I like to see once in a while. You want your characters to have the fear of God in them once in a while, that they got to worry about stuff. So it was fun to see that, and I think that works great. So I'm really pleased with the mechanics and all that stuff. But so before we sum up here, let me just also talk about how aggressively, because one of the things we get all excited about, right, is when you get to an RPG, you want to know that the company is backing it up. And I think it's pretty safe to say that Privateers Press is pretty on board with this thing. The game just came out. The core book came out last fall. They've already released GM screens. They've already released the first supplement called Urban Adventure, which is a soft cover but a meaty book it's got another whole adventure in it and a bunch of new careers centering around life in a city. Also some new races to play. Also, they've now started what's called Full Metal Fantasy Friday. Every Friday on their website, they release a new 2-page supplement for the game. It could be anything from, Styx Raiders, how to play one, or how to have an NPC one, to, equipping your party for a long trek through the mountains. Here's a bunch of gear they might use and the stats for that, and all kinds of stuff. So just constantly thrown out there. They've already got a PDF file with an expanded bestiary up on their website with a lot more creatures that you might want to have in the game. Every no-coder issue so far since the game came out has had some sort of little support, whether it's, the background on how warjacks work in more detail or some new mechanics or some ideas. And they've just released February an errata for the game system as well, with some clarity and stuff around some of the things in the rulebook. So I think they're behind it pretty well. Craig and I were just commenting before the show started that, look, this new Iron Kingdoms token set out from Privateer Press. So they're clearly behind this thing.
Everybody knows how much Russ loves blinging out his games.
You got to have the bling, right? And so clearly it's selling reasonably well because they're making more stuff for it. So hopefully it does well for them. But I think they're doing pretty good with it so far. So we'll see how that goes. So I think it's time to get here to final thoughts on all this. So Craig, before we get to that, we have to describe the patent pending. What's that?
I would like to pose to you.
Uh-oh.
In the mode of a warcaster, trying desperately to figure out which of his warjacks he should put his focus on in the last decisive moments of a battle, you, Russ, describe to us the rating system of the D6 generation.
Wow, okay. So, all right. So, okay, I got my mind's kind of split here because I got the Ironclad. He definitely needs to charge this turn, but the Lancer... The Lancer needs to get in there. And the Hunter needs to shoot, and he needs to boost that to hit roll. I gotta. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna think about my best Jack. My best Jack is gonna be the thing I like the most. It's the thing that if I asked an average player, the average gamer, out of 6 gamers, how many guys would think that's the best Jack? That they would say 2 out of 6. 4 out of 6 gamers out of 2+. 4 out of 6 gamers would like that. That's going to be the best Jack. That's going to be the best game, the best anything. So for that, I'm going to say in this situation, the Hunter. I'm fighting a lot of Caterer guys. The Hunter's going to be the go-to Jack. So I'm going to go to him first. Put some focus on him. Let's say it's a ranged battle. It's a long walk. The Ironclad's got a long walk. I love my Ironclad, but it's a long walk to get there. So maybe he's a 3+. Maybe not everybody likes him so much, in this situation. So he's going to be a 3+. I'm going to go to him. And in this situation too, the Firefly Jack, he looks cool, but he's just not going to work out. He's not going to cut it for this battle. So he's going to be a 6+. I'm only going to get him maybe 1 in 6 times. So basically, the lower the number, the more people are going to like it, the better the rating for the game.
That's really the summary. Thank you, Russ. Excellent work.
All right. So, Craig, why don't you start? We'll save Mac for last. So, Mac, you think about all we've said here today and your likelihood to want to play the game when you rate it. So, Craig, go ahead. What do you think?
Yes. Well, I am, as I've said, not a huge fan of the world, and I am, however, a huge fan of the company and the products that the company puts out. That having been said, I much prefer the role-playing game to the tabletop game. The reason I don't like the game is mostly mechanical. It doesn't have a lot at all to do with the background, and there's so many rich different things within the background and so many cool ways you can combine those two careers that I really do feel that you're getting a lot out of this system just by walking into the world of the Iron Kingdoms. I like the way that it translates the tabletop system into the role-playing game so that I didn't feel like I needed to learn a whole bunch of new stuff. I like the translation of it and the expansion of it so that it covers all the different various situations that you might come into. I do find sometimes that it's ironic because I love the way that the archetype and then the careers work together to kind of dictate what your guy's going to be like. But then at the same time, it's almost like an embarrassment of riches, and you're spoiled for choice on what you want to do because these two careers would be awesome, but it doesn't quite come with one thing that you want, and these two careers would be great, but then you don't get the money from this other career, and so I spent a long time poring over those different 30 careers and trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. Now, that being said, that agonizing over it is probably more of a plus than a negative because you're eventually, the more conversant you are with the system in those different careers, you're going to be able to craft almost whatever you want as far as a type of character out of this system. And because, when I got into and then left War Machine, it was pretty much, different human kingdoms against each other, and that was it. You had like maybe a mercenary unit here or there, or a character here or there. Now, of course, you've got dwarves, you've got elves, they're running around, you've got the ogre, you've got the trolls, and so the whole world has expanded since I went in and then came out of it. And I think that this game really embraces all of that and kind of brings you into all these different things. And there's so much fluff here. so much information on the war jacks and how they work and how you fix them and what it takes to run one. And I really like it. It really takes the story. So far, it's been really hard to figure out the story of the Iron Kingdoms. And what this book does is kind of put it all together for you. So you're no longer trying to flip through a bunch of different sources to try to figure out like what's going on and who's where and what they're doing and what they think. So I really like the way that works. The feat system I love, although it's another point of it's almost like a Euro role playing game. Constantly trying to figure out where to put these points, and you want to hold one back because you don't want to die, but at the same time, you got this one shot, and if this one shot works for you, or you roll doubles and you get your feat point back anyway. And then what happens when you fail and you don't roll doubles? Then you get hit by an ogre and you get knocked off the boat, and then the next thing you know, zombies touching you on the forehead and you're dead. Which was frustrating, but not a weakness in the game. And so I would say this, more than any game that I've played in recently, makes me nervous with every time an encounter begins, because I've seen firsthand how easy it is to get knocked on the head, so to speak. I would give this role-playing game a rating of, I'm going to say fantasy role-playing game. I'm going to say a 4+, but I'm going to say +2 if you're a fan of War Machine Hordes.
There you go. That's a nice rating. So 2+ for War Machine Hordes players, and a 4+ for your average RPG or just gamer, right?
I would say this is pretty much like the 40K roleplay of Privateer Press. If you're a fan of the games, you pretty much need this book just because of all the fluff and the background and the cool stuff that comes with it.
Well, that's true. That's fair. All right, I'll sum up, and then Mac, we'll hear your thoughts on your desire to play here. So, I come into this. Iron Kingdoms is from War Machine Hordes, is one of my favorite fantasy settings. I just love the idea of magic flowing through swords, but you've also got the sort of the semi-sci-fi guns and all that stuff, and sniper rifles, and there's even rocket launchers now, and the Trollbloods and all that stuff. So there's just all kinds of crazy cool giant robots. It's got everything you'd ever want in a fantasy setting, in my humble opinion, and then sci-fi all mushed together. So it's a fantastic setting. I think the character creation system is one of the strongest. I was really nervous. I mentioned this before about John and Joe coming into this. I know they're huge role players, so I was kind of like, what are these guys going to think of this? Is it going to feel like, a company who's not an RPG designing company trying to create an RPG to them? Is it going to feel like very retro or something? They seem to really like it. The biggest comment they have is it just feels really easy to die, but they're not even sure that's a negative. It's just totally different than what they're normally experiencing in D&D. So it's sort of interesting because it does create sort of a different role-playing feeling, even though it's just another quote-unquote fantasy role-playing game, and Lord knows there's enough of them. So it's sort of interesting that I like D&D 4. I've gone and said this before. I like the tactical tabletop combat experience. This game has that as well, but it's got super elegant mechanics that are very easy to teach, I think. And it's got, but all the years of experience of War Machine for game balance and mechanics are in there. So and I said before, I think War Machine's got one of the most elegant miniature combat systems on the planet right now. So I really like that. And as Craig said, the feat point system's great. I've talked before about how I love that idea of hero points in a role-playing game. I love that mechanic. I love that doubles give them back. I like that there's a hard objective rule. Most games that have these hero points, the GM decides when you get them back, and that's great, except it puts a lot of pressure on the GM. You're trying to decide, do I owe them one now? Am I giving out enough? Am I giving out too few? You still have that option.
Am I pacing this reward system?
Am I doing it right? Is it supposed to be a resource to use every swing? But now it's just doubles bring it back no matter what I do, and then but it's also a way I can throw in some GM's grace. So I feel like they're having trouble, I can give them some freebies. I haven't done any GM's grace at all yet. They've been making it through every encounter pretty well, which goes to the balancing system. I think works pretty well. Combat is scary, but I love it. I think that's great. It makes it a very unique feeling. So I'm going to give this. I think if you like RPGs at all, so I don't know if this is going to make any RPG converts out there, but if you're an RPG player, I think you're going to like this on a 3+. I think it's different, and also I think it's very different than a lot of our other RPGs you may have played, just because the core mechanics aren't, percentile or D20. It's a very different core mechanic. I love the boosting element to it. That's very unique. So I think a 3+, you're going to like it. And I agree with Craig. If you're a War Machine or Hordes player, and you like RPGs as well, this is a +1 with a reroll. This is a 2+ with a reroll. This is a must own for any War Machine Hordes fan. So that's my story. Mac, what do you think? After hearing all this and having the RPG background you do, what is your desire to play this game? What do you think people should check this out?
Well, to be fair, my desire to play any role-playing game right now hasn't changed. I will play any RPG that I can find a consistent group to play. So given the opportunity to play consistently, I would happily play this game. It sounds like they've hit a lot of the hallmarks that I want out of a fantasy role-playing game, which is, really, regimented character growth, but with a lot of options to make your character interesting. I really like the combination class system. I'm basically kind of doing the same thing myself. That's something I think is, just kind of the next step in role-playing games is designing your class a little bit on the fly, and kind of defining your character through those choices early on, and then defining your character again and again and again as the storyline moves forward. So, I mean, it just sounds like it's got its core mechanic figured out. It's been well tested. It's very clear, and that it scales very well from early to late game. So, I mean, as a campaign system for a campaign role-playing game, I think it sounds spot on. I've always liked the Iron Kingdom's game world. Some of my friends are more into it than I am. Given my druthers, it's not the one I jump on first. For me, that's Shadowrun. But there's certainly, it doesn't mean it's not a great game, and I'm pretty sure that if I had a group to play it, I would enjoy the hell out of it. Using the 40k armor save, I think it's easily a 3-up invulnerable for me. It's a thunder. It's clearly a storm shield of a game.
Nice. Oh, there you go. Clearly a storm shield of a game. There you go. That's our first storm shield rating. That's great. Well, Mac, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on this episode of the D6 Generation. We really, really appreciate it.
You are doing a yeoman's job over there at Wyrd, so we really appreciate you taking that time out of your schedule to come and join us.
Oh, it's a lot of work to get done.
And Mac, if someone wants to follow your exploits, what you're up to lately, do you have a blog or anything people should check out, or where should they find what you're up to?
Only theoretically. If I give you my blog now, no one will ever go. You'll go there, and then it will never get updated because I'm working so much right now. I do have dicelikethunder.com, but my friend Ian and I are going to start a podcast here pretty soon. That'll be a whole new website and everything. So
nice.
No, I don't.
All right. Well, there you have it.
That's a long way to say that.
Well, watch the Wyrd website then for all of Mac's activities, right? Why not?
And he's on the forum sometimes too. I see him.
Yes. Yeah, he's out there.
Oh, and I'm always on our forums, and I'm absolutely always on Facebook. People can friend me on Facebook, and I'm happy to chat.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks again, Mac, and best of luck with all that finalization you're working on there for, and all the beta testing and everything coming up for Malifaux version 2.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Very exciting.
End of the month.
You looking for news, reviews, and interviews? The D6 Generation. It's groovy is as groovy does defined, baby. The D6 Generation. Born to game. Oh, yeah.
And summer's coming up, and of course, with summer, all thoughts turn to vacations. And if you are a geek, there is only one type of vacation you should be thinking of, and that is a Geek Nation tour.
Indeed, you should. And, New York City Comic-Con coming up. And the great thing about the Geek Nation tours, you want to head over to geeknationtours.com, click on the upcoming tours link near the top there, and you will see all their upcoming tours. And for example, you will see things like the upcoming, let's see what's going on here right now. Oh, in June, they're going to the Lego Brick World Conference and the Geeking Out with Lego Brick World, see all the Lego bricks, see all the things around there that are geeky. How about in July, tour the battlefields of Gettysburg in that area? It's amazing, and you get to see all the great stuff. Those are all booked up now, unfortunately. Those are great ones, examples. They do this every year. They're always fantastic. Geeking Out at VidCon 2013. I mean, there's the Star Trek Geek Nation tours coming up. There's the Mexican Gaming Holiday. All kinds of great stuff coming up. Just keep an eye out for all the great things happening at Geek Nation tours.
If you're a geek, they've got something for you without a doubt.
And don't miss out. New York Comic Con this October. The best way to go see it was with Terrace and the guys at Geek Nation tours.
This edition of Jever Notice is brought to you by Phil McPeak. To the ladies and lads of the Chichester Gamers Society, thanks for making me so welcome. See you all on June 15th for the Epic Games Day. And he wants a special shout out at www.tcgsonline.com. That's for you, Phil. And he wanted me to say,
Viva la Pole!
Somehow I think that clipped. Anyway, did you ever notice how whenever there's work to be done, there are always people who will do it, and there are always people who will watch other people do it? This came to me much more concretely very recently when we had a huge media event in the high school, and one of our kids got a national award. It was awesome. It was amazing. They wanted to surprise her, so they did this big elaborate thing. Happened last year. She's one of only 9 people in the world or in the country to get this award twice. 2 other people, LeBron James, you may have heard of, Derek Jeter, you may have heard of. So it's a very prestigious award, and we set up the whole cafeteria auditorium with the seats and everything, and then I generally, as the theater teacher, am responsible for getting all those seats taken down, and usually there's a couple teachers that teach nearby that will help and send their classes in. So the whole thing was over. We were trying to pick up and stack the chairs and everything, and I was looking around, and I noticed some of my students, not from that class but from other classes, just sitting watching all of these. There were about 30 of us working really hard trying to stack all these chairs so that the lunchroom could be ready to serve lunch very quickly. I mean, we had like a 10-minute turnaround, and there were these people. There's like 5 or 6 of them in a group, honors level kids, just sort of sitting there watching the other people work. And I thought, I don't want my son to be one of those kids. They were good kids. They were fine kids. I like them in class, but when you see a whole bunch of people working, why aren't you offering to help? I don't understand. And they had a sort of disaffected look on their faces, and whatever, who cares? And it really struck me as odd. And then I thought that it really does extend to all walks of life. Whenever there's stuff to be done, whenever there's things that need doing, there are going to be people who do them. And if you look at that mathematical breakdown, I mean, about 30 people were working really hard, and about 5 people weren't. So the question is, like, how big a deal is that? And it's not that big a deal. I mean, it was awesome that all those people were helping. But why weren't those other people getting up and making the job a little bit easier? I don't know. And that got me to thinking, and I do this every now and then, I know, about all the people in gaming that do get up, that do help with the chairs, that do that extra, the henchmen for Wyrd, the old Outriders for 40K, the Privateer Press gang. A lot of people, a lot of companies have those and they name them, but a bunch of people, there's a bunch of people, especially the smaller game companies, have these huge fans that do it just for the fun of it, just to spread their love of these games around. And just as one example, and Tim, I told you I would try to do this and wouldn't be able to do it until next episode, but I did, okay? Alien Dungeon, which you guys will know from a few episodes ago when Ernie and a couple of the other guys were on from Alien Dungeon. They've got a big Kickstarter going right now called All's Quiet on the Martian Front, and one of our local guys, Tim Colonna, is very involved with them and is playtesting with them. And I asked him if he would mind coming to our store, to Myriad Games, and setting up a demo. And he did. He brought over all the terrain. He brought over all the test models that they've been using, not the real models, just stand-ins. But I mean, he went all out. He set the table up. He had the printouts ready for me to go, and he did a whole full-size demo of that game in its playtest mode for me, just so I could get an idea of what the game is like. And it was fun. It was fun and fast and solid, and I really had a good time. And that was all because of Tim. One of those guys that gets up when the chairs need to be taken care of. And it just really made me think about how many positive people there are. If you look at Gen Con, all the volunteers, and if you look at all of the different conventions and just the people that volunteer. Those are the people that get out there and they do it. And I want to be one of those people. And sometimes I am, but sometimes I'm not. I want my son to be one of those people, a person who, who wants to help, who enjoys helping. And I just thought that was great. And I just wanted to give a shout out again to Tim and tell you guys to go check out that Kickstarter because it's awesome. Especially if you like that, the Martian attack. Oh my God, this is the second time in 3 days that I've had this brain cramp. War of the Worlds, thank you. And it's not really my genre, to be honest, and neither is World War II really my war aesthetic, which I've said before. But it is an excellent execution of what they're striving for. So you should check it out. And in the much more broad scheme of things, you should really think about if you're really passionate about something, is there a way you can help it? Is there a way you can give back? Because that's just really the way most of this whole industry works. And it's really important that as many people as possible give back and try to help out. And that's about all I've got to say. A little announcement, and it's going to be way too late. By the time you're listening to this, I will be home. I find it extremely bizarre that tomorrow at 5 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting on an airplane and going to Phoenix, Arizona to go to the Phoenix Comic-Con. To be there with the Wild West Exodus crew, and I'm going to meet my artist, Michael Nigro, for the first time, which is going to be awesome. We've been working together for months and months and months now, constantly going back and forth on email and things like that. And so I'm very excited. I've never been to a Comic-Con before, so I'm very intrigued. Apparently 15,000 people showed up yesterday. So it's not nearly as small as I thought it was going to be. So I'm a little intimidated, but it should be a lot of fun. I feel like I'm kind of on a roller coaster all of a sudden. And the last 2 months have really things have really started to click. And I want to thank all of you who have sent in emails and tweets and commented on Facebook and on DACA. It's been really, really nice to see all that positive feedback and hear those positive things, and to hear from you guys who have faith in me in this new endeavor. I'm very, very excited. So thank you. Thank all of you for getting up to take care of the chair that is my faltering ego. So I guess that's about all I've got to say about that at this time. So seriously, thank you very much for listening all the way to the end, and good night.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@the d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
Noise. I have nothing.
Here, Craig, give me a little bit of noise here.
Rusty the latte boy.
What? Okay.
Well, you're lucky I didn't sing the rest of it.
Mac, you got any noise for me there?
Yeah, I'm just going to actually talk to Justin for a second while you guys are doing that. For the upload tonight, are you telling him about avatars and scheme changes and
You mentioned all that.
And I made sure not to export that last guy on the 10Ts. Right. So, yeah, everything should be set and good.
Yep. Yeah, I'll mention all this, like, schemes change, strategies change, 5 turns now. Here's some avatars. Oh, there's a new upgrade and everything. Like, there's a lot of change.
They're going to hate us.
Or wouldn't love us. I think they'll like a lot.
Well, like, I think they're... True, but I think they're getting used to the idea that things that look like bigger changes aren't actually very big changes. But for some reason, little things look huge to some of them.
I heard there's a whole theory about IQ behind that.
All right.
Perfect sense to me.
In honor of the new Star Trek films, here's a great Star Trek parody from the folks at Scrimshank Records. Check them out on Facebook at Scrimshank Records.
Look up to the skies, see me roll by the Enterprise. Hailing frequencies, let them know this the Federation fleet. We bow to go where no man has gone before. But God says to make it so don't give me warp 3 cause it's time to go, yeah.
Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet.
Got to Kirk out.
Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet.
Got to Kirk out when I walk in the cone. This is what I see. All the other sparks start staring at me with a passion in his hands, and we ain't afraid to show it, show it, show it, show it.
We Trekkies and we know it. We Trekkies and we know it.
Yeah. If you see Klingons, better make sure that your face is on. And if you're in the fleet, rep your uniform, cause it's future chic. All the haters know we got photon torpedoes. Throw the Vulcan up if you're not from Romulus, and stay with me now, live long and prosperous.
Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet.
You got to Kirk out.
Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet.
You got to Kirk out when I walk in the cone. This is what I see. All the other sparks start staring at me with a passion in his hands, and we ain't afraid to show it, show it, show it, show it.
We Trekkies and we know it. We Trekkies and we know it.
Chickle up. Chickle up. Dribble, 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 yeah. Dribble, 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 yeah. Dribble, 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 yeah. Dribble, 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 yeah, yeah. I says there, Jim. I says there, Jim. Yeah. We Trekkies and we know it. Aye. Yeah.
Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet.
You got to Kirk out.
Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet. Just beam me up, Skynet.
You got to Kirk out.
We are Trekkies.